The formation of the Imperial Guard traces its origins to the aftermath of the Horus Heresy, the devastating civil war which nearly tore the Imperium asunder in the early 31st millennium. As the dust settled on battlefields across thousands of worlds, the Emperor's dream lay in tatters, the master of mankind himself confined to the Golden Throne, and fully half of his superhuman Space Marine legions turned traitor. The Imperium's military forces required extensive reorganization to prevent such catastrophic betrayal from ever occurring again. While Guilliman's Codex Astartes famously divided the remaining loyal Space Marine legions into smaller chapters during the Second Founding, less celebrated but equally significant reforms reshaped the human military forces. The Imperial Army, which had served as the primary non-Astartes military arm during the Great Crusade, underwent a critical division. Naval and ground forces, previously unified under single commanders whose power had proven dangerously unchecked during the heresy, were separated into two distinct organizations, the Imperial Navy and the Imperial Guard. This separation of powers represented a calculated decision by the High Lords of Terra. Never again would military commanders control both the means of transport between stars and the forces needed to conquer worlds. The Imperial Guard would provide the ground forces, while the Imperial Navy would control void travel and orbital support. Neither could operate effectively without the other, ensuring a system of mutual dependence that made future large-scale rebellions significantly more difficult to orchestrate. The Imperial Guard emerged as the backbone of Imperial military might. Unlike the genetically enhanced Adeptus Astartes or the cybernetically augmented Skidare forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus, the Imperial Guard represents humanity in its most fundamental form, unaltered men and women armed with lasguns and faith in the Emperor. What distinguishes the Imperial Guard from these more specialized forces is not just their composition, but their application. The Adeptus Astartes are surgical instruments, deployed in small numbers to decapitate enemy leadership or secure critical objectives. The Skidare and other Mechanicus forces primarily defend forge worlds and support explorator fleets. The Imperial Guard, by contrast, is the hammer of the Emperor, deployed in overwhelming numbers to crush resistance through sheer weight of bodies and materiel. A common military adage within the Departmentum Unitorum states, Astartes win battles, but Guard win wars. This reflects the fundamental truth that while Space Marines may turn the tide in critical engagements, only the Imperial Guard possesses the sheer numerical strength to hold territory across the million worlds of the Imperium. For every Space Marine, there are millions of Guardsmen standing watch on countless worlds. The Departmentum Unitorum, a subdivision of the Adeptus Administratum, oversees the Byzantine organizational structure of the Imperial Guard. This vast bureaucracy manages everything from recruitment and training to equipment procurement and strategic deployment. The Munitorum's influence extends to every corner of the Imperium, with offices on virtually every Imperial world of significance. These administrative centers process the Imperial tithe of manpower, ensuring a constant flow of fresh recruits to replace the Guard's staggering casualties. At the apex of the Imperial Guard's chain of command stands the Lord Commander of the Astra Militarum, a High Lord of Terra who serves as the theoretical commander of all Guard forces. In practice, the sheer scale of the Imperium and the limitations of interstellar communication make centralized command impossible in most circumstances. The Lord Commander establishes broad strategic objectives and allocates resources, but tactical decision-making necessarily devolves to lower levels. Beneath the Lord Commander are the Lord Commander's militant, each responsible for one of the 5 segmenti majoris that divide the Imperium administratively. These individuals coordinate Guard activities within their respective regions, though even this level of command remains largely strategic rather than tactical. The 5 segmenti majoris, Solar, Pacificus, Tempestus, Obscurus, and Ultima, each contain countless sectors and subsectors, creating additional layers of command. Warmaster is a rarely bestowed rank granted to commanders of particularly significant Imperial crusades, giving them authority over all Imperial military assets within their theater of operations. Since the betrayal of Horus, this title has been awarded with extreme caution, and those who bear it find themselves under constant scrutiny from commissars, the Inquisition, and other imperial agencies. The operational level of command typically falls to Lord Generals, who may control multiple army groups comprising millions of troops across several star systems. Below them, generals, lieutenant generals, and major generals command progressively smaller formations down to the level of individual regiments. Colonels typically lead regiments, with majors, captains, and lieutenants commanding battalions, companies, and platoons respectively. At the foundation of this pyramid stands the common guardsman, typically a trooper of the rank and file led by non-commissioned officers such as sergeants and corporals. These ordinary humans form the overwhelming majority of the Imperial Guard's fighting strength. Drawn from thousands of different worlds, they bring with them diverse cultural backgrounds, combat doctrines, and equipment patterns, unified only by their service to the Emperor and the standardized elements of their wargear. The regimental structure forms the primary organizational unit of the Imperial Guard. Unlike the Adeptus Astartes, whose chapters remain relatively static organizations, Guard regiments are raised specifically for particular campaigns or crusades. A planet's tithe might include raising several new regiments, which are then shipped to their designated war zones with the understanding that they will likely never return to their homeworld. This practice of permanent deployment serves multiple purposes. It prevents the formation of powerful regional armies that might threaten imperial rule, ensures fresh troops are constantly being fed into ongoing conflicts, and creates a system where regiments develop fierce loyalty to the Imperium rather than to their planets of origin. For most guardsmen, the regiment becomes their home, their family, and their entire world. Regiments typically specialize in particular forms of warfare based on the characteristics of their homeworld. Catachan jungle fighters excel at guerrilla warfare in dense terrain, having been raised on a death world where every plant and animal is lethal. Cadian shock troops are disciplined all-around soldiers trained from childhood in the arts of war. Valhallan ice warriors specialize in cold weather operations. Death Corps of Krieg excel at siege warfare and attrition tactics. These specializations allow the Departamento Munitorum to deploy appropriate forces to specific theaters based on environmental conditions and tactical requirements. The Commissariat provides another critical element of the Imperial Guard's command structure. These political officers, trained by the Officio Praefectus, serve as the embodiment of imperial authority within Guard regiments. Commissars maintain morale through a combination of inspirational leadership and the ruthless execution of those who display cowardice or disloyalty. Their authority transcends the normal chain of command, allowing them to countermand orders from officers they deem insufficiently devoted to victory. Beyond the formal hierarchy, the Imperial Guard maintains complex relationships with other imperial organizations. Priests of the Adeptus Ministorum accompany regiments to provide spiritual guidance and foster religious fervor. Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests maintain vehicles and more complex weaponry. Astropaths facilitate long-range communication, while navigators guide troop transports through the warp. This interdependence reflects the Guard's position as a fundamentally human institution, reliant on specialized support to function at peak efficiency. The symbolic importance of the Imperial Guard extends far beyond its military utility. In a galaxy where humanity faces extinction at the hands of countless alien species, demonic entities, and traitorous forces, the Guard represents mankind's determination to survive through collective effort and sacrifice. Space Marines may be superhuman heroes, but they are so far removed from ordinary humanity that they often inspire rather than identification. The Guardsman, by contrast, embodies the potential within every Imperial citizen to contribute to humanity's continued survival. This symbolic role is reflected in Imperial propaganda, which glorifies the sacrifices of the Guard and portrays them as the true inheritors of the Emperor's vision for humanity. Famous regiments become household names across entire sectors, their exploits celebrated in Imperial liturgies and dramatized in morale-boosting Pict recordings. The Cadian 8th, the Catachan 2nd, the Tanith 1st and only, these units and countless others have achieved legendary status through their deeds, inspiring new generations of recruits to volunteer for service. the Guard's importance is further underscored by the sheer scale of its operations. In the 41st millennium, the Departamento Munitorum estimates that approximately 500 billion Guardsmen are under arms at any given time, spread across thousands of active war zones. Entire planets are dedicated to training new regiments, while vast manufactoria produce the standardized equipment that allows this enormous force to function cohesively despite its disparate origins. The lasgun exemplifies this approach to warfare. While lacking the stopping power of bolters or plasma weapons, the standard-issue lasgun can be mass-produced by the billions, requires minimal maintenance, and operates reliably in virtually any environment. Its power packs can be recharged from any energy source, and its components are standardized across the Imperium. This weapon embodies the Guard's philosophy, not the best, but good enough when deployed in sufficient numbers. The Imperial tithe system forms the fundamental backbone of the Astra Militarum's recruitment process. Every world within the Imperium's vast domains owes a debt to the God Emperor, payable not just in material resources, but in the blood of its citizens. The Departamento Munitorum maintains extensive records of each world's population density, technological development, and military tradition to calculate appropriate tithe grades. These grades, ranging from aptus non to exactis extremis, determine how many regiments a world must raise when called upon. When the black ships of the Administratum arrive in orbit, planetary governors scramble to fulfill their obligations. The methods of recruitment vary dramatically from world to world. On Cadia, before its fall, virtually the entire population underwent military training from childhood, making regimental founding a straightforward process of selecting the most capable individuals. On Catachan, surviving to adulthood is itself a trial by fire, with those who reach maturity already hardened killers. Many hive worlds employ conscription lotteries, while feudal planets may require noble houses to provide men at arms according to their status and holdings. The founding of a new regiment represents a significant logistical undertaking. The Departamento Munitorum dispatches assessment teams to oversee the process, accompanied by commissars who evaluate the moral fiber of potential recruits. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus inspect and bless the equipment manufactured locally for the regiment's use. Ministorum priests conduct mass benediction ceremonies, instilling devotion to the Emperor in the hearts of the new Guardsmen. Once raised, a regiment rarely returns to its homeworld. This deliberate policy serves multiple strategic purposes. It prevents the accumulation of military power in the hands of planetary governors who might harbor secessionist ambitions. It ensures that soldiers develop primary loyalty to the Imperium rather than to their native cultures. Perhaps most importantly, it allows the Astra Militarum to maintain a constant flow of fresh troops to war zones throughout the galaxy. For the individual Guardsmen, the moment of founding marks a permanent separation from their previous life. They will likely never again see the skis under which they were born. Their regiment becomes their new home, their comrades their new family. The regimental colors, bearing the unit designation and often incorporating elements of their homeworld's iconography, become their primary symbol of identity and pride. The command structure of the Astra Militarum reflects the Imperium's broader approach to governance. Layers of overlapping authority, checks and balances to prevent the concentration of power, and a rigid hierarchy designed to function despite the vast distances separating units. At the highest level, strategic command falls to the Lord Commander Militant of the Astra Militarum, one of the High Lords of Terra. Below this position serve the 5 Lord Commanders, each responsible for overseeing military operations within one of the Segmenti Majoris. Warmasters, appointed only in times of significant conflict, hold authority over all Imperial military assets within their designated theater of operations. This rare rank carries both tremendous power and the weight of historical suspicion, as the title remains forever associated with Horus's betrayal. Those elevated to this position find themselves subject to constant scrutiny from multiple Imperial organizations. The operational level of command typically begins with Lord Generals, who may control army groups comprising multiple millions of troops across several star systems. The chain of command then descends through generals, lieutenant generals, and major generals, down to the colonels who typically command individual regiments. At each level, staff officers manage the immense logistical challenges of coordinating forces across interstellar distances. The commissariat, formerly known as the officio praefectus, provides a parallel command structure that intersects with the standard military hierarchy. Commissars serve as political officers, ensuring the loyalty and morale of both troops and their commanders. Their authority derives directly from the Adeptus Terra, allowing them to override the decisions of military officers when necessary and execute those who display cowardice or disloyalty. The sight of a commissar's black uniform and red-trimmed greatcoat is designed to inspire both respect and fear. Training for commissars takes place in special Schola Progenium facilities, where orphaned children of imperial officials receive intensive indoctrination in imperial dogma alongside military instruction. Those who display suitable temperament and absolute loyalty are selected for commissarial training, emerging as uncompromising embodiments of imperial authority. A commissar may be assigned to oversee a single regiment, or, in the case of more senior members of the officio praefectus, might supervise multiple regiments within a larger formation. The regimental level represents the most significant organizational unit in the Astra Militarum structure. Unlike the relatively standardized Space Marine chapters, Guard regiments vary enormously in size, composition, and tactical doctrine. A regiment might number anywhere from 1,000 to 20,000 soldiers, depending on its type and the military traditions of its founding world. This variation allows the Departamento Munitorum to deploy forces tailored to specific battlefield conditions and strategic objectives. Infantry regiments form the most common type, primarily composed of foot soldiers equipped with lasguns and basic personal equipment. These regiments typically organize into companies of 100-150 men, further divided into platoons and squads. Command structures generally follow a standard pattern, with a colonel commanding the regiment, majors leading battalions, captains in charge of companies, and lieutenants commanding platoons. Non-commissioned officers like sergeants provide leadership at the squad level, serving as the crucial link between the common trooper and the officer corps. Armored regiments present a different organizational challenge. Centered around tanks and other armored vehicles, these units contain fewer personnel, but require extensive technical support and maintenance facilities. A typical armored regiment might field between 50 and 200 main battle tanks, usually variants of the venerable Lehman Russ, supported by numerous lighter vehicles. Tank crews develop strong bonds, with each vehicle developing its own traditions and battle honors. Technical expertise proves as important as martial skill, with experienced crew members able to coax remarkable performance from their machines through a combination of practical knowledge and appropriate devotional rites. Artillery regiments specialize in indirect fire support, fielding batteries of weapons ranging from relatively mobile basilisk self-propelled guns to massive, fixed earthshaker cannons. These units operate at greater distances from the front lines, but require sophisticated Vox communication systems and forward observation teams to direct their fire effectively. The calculations necessary for accurate artillery strikes often involve both mathematical computation and interpretation of the Emperor's will through sanctified targeting cogitators. Mechanized infantry regiments represent a hybrid approach, combining the manpower of infantry formations with the mobility of armored units. Troops typically deploy in Chimera armored personnel carriers or similar vehicles, allowing rapid redeployment across the battlefield. This mobility comes at the cost of increased logistical requirements, particularly fuel consumption and mechanical maintenance. Beyond these standard types, the Astra Militarum fields numerous specialist regiments adapted to particular environments or tactical roles. Drop regiments specialize in aerial insertion via Valkyrie transports or Grav chutes. Siege regiments focus on breaking or establishing fortified positions. Light infantry excels at reconnaissance and skirmishing. Tempestus Scions, the elite special operations forces of the Astra Militarum, receive superior equipment and training compared to standard guardsmen, deploying in small teams for high-priority missions. The standard organization of a regiment includes not just combat troops, but also essential support personnel. Medici units provide battlefield first aid and more comprehensive treatment in field hospitals. Enginseer detachments from the Adeptus Mechanicus maintain vehicles and complex weapon systems. Astropaths facilitate long-range communication, while sanctioned psychers may provide both tactical intelligence and direct psychic support in combat. Ministorum priests attend to the spiritual needs of the troops, leading prayers before battle and administering last rites to the dying. Regimental combat doctrine varies dramatically based on a unit's homeworld culture and specialization. The Cadians emphasize disciplined volley fire and coordinated advances. Catachan jungle fighters excel at ambush tactics and close-quarters combat. Talern desert raiders master mobile warfare across open terrain. Death Corps of Krieg approach warfare with fatalistic determination, excelling in attritional conflicts where casualties run high. These doctrinal differences reflect both practical adaptation to different environments and the cultural heritage each regiment carries from its founding world. Despite these variations, certain standard operating procedures remain consistent across most Astra Militarum formations. The Infantry Primer, a simplified tactical manual distributed to officers throughout the Imperial Guard, establishes basic principles for combat operations. These include the importance of concentrated lasgun fire to overcome enemy armor through sheer volume of shots, the proper deployment of heavy weapons to establish overlapping fields of fire, and the use of bayonet charges to clear entrenched positions when necessary. The battlefield roles assigned to Imperial Guard regiments typically reflect their strengths and limitations. Infantry regiments hold ground, establish defensive perimeters, and conduct frontal assaults when required. Armored formations provide breakthrough capability and mobile firepower. Artillery delivers suppressive fire to pin enemy forces and preparatory bombardment before infantry advances. In combined arms operations, these different elements work together to maximize their respective strengths while compensating for individual vulnerabilities. When deployed alongside other Imperial forces, the Astra Militarum generally serves as the anvil to the Space Marines' hammer. Guard regiments establish defensive lines, hold territory, and engage the bulk of enemy forces, allowing the more elite Adeptus Astartes to strike at critical objectives with precision. This complementary relationship exemplifies the Imperium's approach to warfare, the expendable many creating opportunities for the irreplaceable few. The logistical requirements of maintaining guard regiments in the field present enormous challenges for the Departamento Munitorum. Each soldier requires not just weapons and ammunition, but also food, water, medical supplies, and replacement equipment. The standardization of certain key items, particularly the ubiquitous lasgun and its power packs, simplifies this logistical burden somewhat. Nevertheless, the movement of supplies across interstellar distances remains one of the most complex aspects of Imperial military operations. The Cadian shock troops stand as perhaps the most renowned of all Imperial Guard regiments, their very name synonymous with military discipline and unwavering loyalty. Before its destruction during the 13th Black Crusade, Cadia itself served as the linchpin of the Imperium's defenses against the Eye of Terror, a fortress world where every aspect of society was geared toward war. Children born on Cadia received their first lasgun before they could properly walk, and military training began almost immediately thereafter. The planet's famous saying, "The only fear is failing in your duty," encapsulated the Cadian mindset perfectly. Cadian regiments typically wore flak armor in their distinctive green and khaki colors, with officers distinguishable by their peaked caps and additional insignia. Their equipment maintained a standard significantly above that of most guard formations, with each trooper receiving not just the ubiquitous lasgun, but also frag grenades, a combat knife, and often a las pistol as a sidearm. This superior outfitting reflected Cadia's strategic importance and its relatively advanced industrial base compared to many Imperial worlds. The martial culture of Cadia produced soldiers of exceptional quality. From their earliest years, Cadians practiced weapons drills, tactical maneuvers, and physical conditioning. By adolescence, most had already participated in live-fire exercises against captured heretics or even demons that occasionally materialized near the eye. This lifelong preparation created troops who could maintain disciplined lasgun volleys even under the most horrific conditions, holding formation when soldiers from other worlds would break and flee. Cadian military organization followed a highly standardized pattern, with regiments typically numbering between 3,000 and 6,000 troops divided into companies, platoons, and squads. Command structures emphasized initiative at the junior officer level, allowing Cadian formations to adapt rapidly to changing battlefield conditions while maintaining overall strategic coherence. This flexibility proved crucial during countless engagements against the forces of chaos, whose unpredictable tactics often confounded more rigid Imperial commanders. The Catachan represented the elite of Cadian military forces, stormtroopers equipped with carapace armor and hellguns who specialized in high-risk operations. Drawn from the most capable soldiers in standard regiments, Catachan underwent additional training that honed their already formidable skills to a razor's edge. These units typically deployed to secure critical objectives, eliminate enemy leadership, or counter particularly dangerous threats that conventional troops couldn't handle effectively. Cadia's ultimate fate arrived with Abaddon the Despoiler's 13th Black Crusade in 999 M41. Despite heroic resistance from billions of Cadian troops, reinforced by Space Marine chapters, Titan legions, and other Imperial forces, the planet ultimately fell when Abaddon crashed the remains of the Blackstone Fortress Will of Eternity into its surface. The resulting cataclysm shattered Cadia completely, creating the Great Rift that now divides the Imperium. Even in defeat, however, the Cadians exemplified their unyielding spirit. As their most famous saying goes, Cadia stands. This rallying cry continues to inspire the surviving Cadian regiments, now supplemented by new recruits drawn from refugee populations and trained in the Cadian tradition by veterans of the fallen world. The Death Corps of Krieg presents a stark contrast to most Imperial Guard regiments, their origins rooted not in loyal service, but in treachery and subsequent penance. Approximately 1,500 years ago, the industrial world of Krieg descended into civil war when its planetary governor declared independence from the Imperium. The planet's loyalist forces, led by Colonel Jerton, responded with a desperate measure: the deployment of nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons that transformed Krieg into a toxic wasteland, but ultimately preserved Imperial rule. The subsequent centuries saw Krieg's population adapt to their poisoned environment, dwelling in underground hive cities and venturing to the surface only in protective gear. This harsh existence shaped a culture of extreme fatalism and self-sacrifice, with Krieg's people viewing themselves as perpetually indebted to the Emperor for their ancestors' betrayal. Each generation dedicates itself to repaying this debt through military service, with regiments tithed to the Imperium at a rate that would deplete most worlds' populations, but which Krieg meets through extensive use of vidi-womb technology to produce new soldiers. Death Corps troops present a distinctive and unsettling appearance on the battlefield. Their standard uniform consists of a greatcoat in dark green-gray, heavy boots, and their iconic gas masks, which they wear at all times even in environments where respiratory protection serves no practical purpose. This faceless appearance reinforces their reputation as grim, silent killers who view death, both the enemy's and their own, with cold detachment. The combat doctrine of Krieg regiment centers on siege warfare and attritional conflict. Death Corps commanders calculate victory in terms of acceptable losses rather than attempting to minimize casualties, deploying their troops in wave assaults against heavily fortified positions when necessary. Engineers constitute a significant portion of Krieg forces, specializing in trench warfare, minefield clearance, and breaching operations. Their artillery batteries exhibit exceptional accuracy, the result of generations spent perfecting the mathematical calculations required for indirect fire. Perhaps most disturbing to other Imperial forces who fight alongside them is the Death Corps' approach to morale. Where other regiments might break under sustained pressure, Krieg troops advance with mechanical precision regardless of losses. They request no quarter and offer none, executing their own wounded when battlefield conditions prevent evacuation. Commissars assigned to Death Corps regiments often find themselves in the unusual position of restraining troops from undertaking suicidally aggressive actions rather than preventing retreat. The Departamento Munitorum typically deploys Death Corps regiments to the most grinding, attritional theaters of war, siege operations, toxic environments, or battles of pure endurance where their fatalistic mindset proves advantageous. During the defense of Rax Prime, Death Corps forces spent 17 years in constant combat operations to reclaim a strategic arsenal world from Chaos forces, accepting millions of casualties, but ultimately securing victory through sheer determination. The Catachan jungle fighters emerge from a world as lethal as any battlefield they might subsequently face. Catachan itself ranks among the most notorious deathworlds in the Imperium, a planet where the entire ecosystem seems designed to eliminate human life. Carnivorous plants, venomous insects, massive predators, and even the atmospheric spores conspire to kill the unwary, creating an environment where simply surviving to adulthood represents a significant achievement. Physically, Catachans tend toward muscular builds developed through constant struggle against their homeworld's hostile conditions. Their standard combat uniform consists of sleeveless flak vests, camouflage pants, and distinctive red bandanas, with many troops also sporting tattoos commemorating particularly impressive kills or survival feats. This less formal appearance belies their exceptional combat effectiveness, particularly in dense terrain where their lifelong experience navigating lethal environments gives them a decisive advantage. Catachan regiments specialize in guerrilla warfare, ambush tactics, and reconnaissance operations. Their training emphasizes self-reliance, with each soldier capable of operating independently when necessary, rather than depending on rigid command structures. Close quarters combat represents a particular strength, with the famous Catachan Devil Knife serving as both practical tool and deadly weapon. Many Catachans supplement their standard issue lasguns with flamers, demolition charges, and heavy stubbers, weapons well suited to the dense environments where they excel. The cultural background of Catachan troops influences their regimental organization and discipline. Formal military hierarchy exists, but functions alongside a more organic leadership system based on proven ability rather than official rank. Veterans known as jungle fighters command respect regardless of their technical position, with even officers deferring to their expertise in certain situations. This pragmatic approach sometimes creates friction with more conventionally structured imperial organizations, but produces results that silence most critics. When deployed against Xeno's threats, particularly Tyranids and Orcs, Catachan regiments demonstrate exceptional effectiveness. Their experience hunting the megafauna of their homeworld translates directly to tracking and eliminating large alien organisms, while their familiarity with toxic environments helps them navigate battlefields contaminated by alien biochemistry. During the Third Tyrannic War, Catachan forces proved instrumental in containing splinter fleets through targeted strikes against synapse creatures, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of Tyranid biology that more conventional tacticians lacked. The Mordian Iron Guard represents the opposite end of the spectrum from the individualistic Catachans, embodying rigid discipline and parade ground precision even under fire. Mordia itself exists in a state of perpetual darkness on one side and burning light on the other due to its tidally locked orbit, with its population concentrated in overcrowded hive cities. This environment produced a culture that values order above all else, with strict social hierarchies and formalized behavior patterns that carry over into military organization. Mordian troops maintain immaculate appearances regardless of battlefield conditions, wearing distinctive blue dress uniforms complete with gold braid, polished buttons, and peaked caps even in combat zones. This seeming impracticality serves a psychological purpose, demonstrating the Iron Guard's absolute commitment to discipline and their rejection of concessions to circumstance. A Mordian soldier would rather die than appear disheveled or break formation without explicit orders. The tactical doctrine of Mordian regiments centers on precisely coordinated volley fire and bayonet charges. When deployed in defensive positions, Iron Guard troops arrange themselves in parade ground formations, presenting a seemingly vulnerable target, but maximizing their collective firepower. This disciplined approach has repeatedly confounded enemies who mistake ceremonial appearance for military ineffectiveness, only to face devastating coordinated fire from troops who maintain perfect shooting positions even while comrades fall around them. Commissars assigned to Mordian regiments often find themselves with little to do, as the Iron Guard's self-imposed discipline frequently exceeds even the harsh standards of the officio praefectus. Indeed, in several documented cases, Mordian officers have executed commissars who ordered tactical retreats, viewing such commands as contradictory to their understanding of the Emperor's will. This extreme dedication makes Mordian forces particularly valuable in battles against chaos, where their unshakable discipline renders them resistant to the psychological warfare that often precedes warp-tainted assaults. The Vestroyan Firstborn carry the weight of ancient tradition alongside their ornate lasguns and distinctive crimson uniforms. During the Horus Heresy, Vestroya refused the Imperium's call for troops, choosing instead to maintain its production of munitions and supplies. Though this decision supported the broader war effort, the planet's leadership has viewed it as a shameful failure ever since. To atone, Vestroya instituted a tradition wherein the firstborn son of every family must serve in the Imperial Guard, creating regiments literally composed of a planet's genetic legacy. Vestroyan equipment reflects their industrial heritage, with troops carrying intricately decorated weapons handed down through generations of service. Their distinctive peaked fur hats, long greatcoats, and brass-buttoned uniforms evoke an aesthetic from Terra's distant past, maintained through millennia as a connection to their regimental heritage. Each company carries ancient banners listing the names of all who have served under its colors, some dating back to the original founding in the 36th millennium. Tactically, Vestroyan regiments favor coordinated advances supported by heavy weapons teams. Their industrial background produces excellent technical specialists, particularly in the maintenance and operation of plasma weapons, heavy bolters, and auto-cannons. Vestroyan officers typically come from noble families with centuries of military tradition, bringing both tactical education and aristocratic hauteur to their command style. This combination of technical proficiency and traditional leadership creates effective combined arms formations capable of adapting to various battlefield conditions. The Tallarn Desert Raiders developed their distinctive combat style through adaptation to one of the harshest environments in the Imperium. Originally a verdant paradise, Tallarn was transformed into a desert wasteland during the Horus Heresy when the Iron Warriors subjected it to viral bombardment. The surviving population adapted to this new reality, learning to conserve water, navigate the endless dunes, and strike with devastating speed before disappearing back into the desert. Tallarn troops wear light tan fatigues wrapped with cloth to protect against sand and sun, with their faces covered by respirator masks and goggles. This practical attire allows them to endure extreme temperature variations and dust storms that would incapacitate soldiers from more temperate worlds. Their equipment emphasizes mobility and reliability under harsh conditions, with specially modified lasguns resistant to sand infiltration and lighter support weapons that can be transported quickly across difficult terrain. The combat doctrine of Tallarn regiment centers on mobile warfare and ambush tactics. They excel at rapid deployment using chimera transports and sentinel walkers, striking exposed enemy positions before withdrawing to prepare the next attack. Tallarn commanders view warfare as a form of desert survival, conservation of resources, careful planning, and precise application of force at the enemy's most vulnerable points. This approach has proved particularly effective against orcs and Chaos Space Marines, whose more aggressive tactics can be turned against them by patient opponents. Beyond these most famous examples, countless other regiments have earned renown across the Imperium's long history. The Valhallan Ice Warriors bring their experience of cold weather operations to frozen deathworlds and ice planets. The Armageddon Steel Legion specializes in mechanized warfare across toxic industrial landscapes. The Tanith First and only, the famous Ghosts, developed unparalleled stealth capabilities before the destruction of their homeworld. The Elysian Drop troops execute high-altitude insertions into enemy territory, deploying directly from orbit using grav chutes and Valkyrie transports. Each of these regiments carries not just the military traditions of their homeworld, but also centuries of battle honors earned across countless campaigns. The Mordian 56th, the Emperor's Cold Hearts, held the Prosanctus Starfort for 6 months against a Chaos warband, despite being reduced to just 37 combat-effective troops. The Catachan 18th, Swamprats, eliminated a Tyrannid Synapse beast on Ulsonus Prime using nothing but combat knives after their ammunition was exhausted. The Cadian 8th, the Lord Castellan's Own, fought as the personal regiment of Lord Castellan Creed during the 13th Black Crusade, participating in some of the most critical engagements before Cadia's fall. The lasgun stands as the most ubiquitous weapon in the Imperium's arsenal, with trillions produced annually across thousands of Forge worlds. Officially designated the Las Rifle Pattern M Galaxy, though countless local variants exist, this weapon represents the perfect compromise between manufacturing efficiency and battlefield effectiveness. The standard Cantrell pattern lasgun weighs approximately 3 kg, measures 900 min length, and fires a focused beam of laser energy capable of burning through flesh and light armor. While lacking the raw stopping power of bolters or plasma weapons, the lasgun's reliability in virtually any environment makes it the backbone of Imperial Guard firepower. What distinguishes the lasgun from more primitive solid projectile weapons is its power efficiency and logistical simplicity. Each power pack provides between 40 and 60 shots depending on power settings and can be recharged from any power source, including being left in sunlight in emergency situations, though this method drastically reduces capacity. A well-maintained lasgun can function for decades with minimal maintenance, making it ideal for distribution to troops with limited technical training. The weapon's lack of moving parts eliminates many common failure points, while its energy-based ammunition removes concerns about powder degradation or shell deformation. The standard lasgun fires in semi-automatic mode, though many patterns include selective fire capabilities for short bursts. Muzzle energy typically ranges between 19 and 21 megajoules, sufficient to remove limbs or punch through flak armor at close range. The beam's cauterizing effect means wounds inflicted by lasguns rarely bleed, though the intense heat often causes secondary tissue damage beyond the immediate path of the laser. Against unarmored human targets, a lasgun shot to center mass is generally lethal, while against more heavily armored foes like orcs or Chaos Space Marines, concentrated fire from multiple weapons becomes necessary. Several common variants of the basic lasgun design exist throughout the Imperium. The Catachan pattern, favored by mechanized infantry regiments, features a shorter barrel and folding stock for use in confined spaces. The Triplex pattern, common among Mordian regiments, incorporates an underslung launcher for photon flash grenades. The Catachan Mark IV, designed for jungle warfare, includes a reinforced stock that doubles as an effective melee weapon and moisture-sealed components resistant to humid environments. The Laspistol serves as the standard sidearm for officers and vehicle crews, operating on the same principles as the lasgun, but with reduced range and power. These weapons typically draw from smaller power packs providing 20-30 shots and can be fired one-handed in emergency situations. While primarily considered backup weapons, Laspistols prove effective in close-quarter environments where their lighter weight and faster targeting compensate for reduced stopping power. For elite formations like Tempestus Scions, the Hellgun represents a significant upgrade over standard laser weapons. Drawing power from backpack generators rather than conventional power packs, Hellguns fire higher energy beams capable of penetrating carapace armor and even some variants of power armor when concentrated. This increased performance comes at the cost of greater power consumption and more complex maintenance requirements, limiting Hellgun distribution to troops with appropriate technical training and logistical support. The even more potent hotshot volley gun, essentially a multi-barreled Hellgun, delivers devastating short-range firepower at the cost of mobility and sustained fire capability. These weapons typically mount on fixed positions or are carried by specially designated heavy weapons troopers who accept reduced movement speed in exchange for the ability to suppress even heavily armored targets. During the Damocles Gulf Crusade, hotshot volley guns proved particularly effective against Tau battlesuits, their rapid-fire capability overwhelming drone shield systems through sheer volume of energy discharge. Moving beyond laser technology, heavy weapons squads form the backbone of Imperial Guard anti-armor and suppression capabilities. Each standard infantry platoon typically includes at least one heavy weapons squad, with deployment patterns varying based on anticipated threats and terrain conditions. These squads operate weapons too large or complex for individual troopers, requiring two-man teams, one gunner and one loader, to function effectively in combat situations. The heavy bolter represents the most common support weapon in Guard formations. This scaled-up version of the iconic bolter fires .998 caliber mass reactive shells at a rate of 400-500 rounds per minute, creating devastating effects against light vehicles and infantry concentrations. The weapon's mass reactive ammunition, shells that detonate after penetrating the target, makes it particularly effective against tyrannid creatures and orc mobs, where conventional solid projectiles might pass through without causing significant damage. A well-positioned heavy bolter team can hold a choke point against numerically superior forces, the weapon's distinctive throaty roar often proving as effective a deterrent as the actual firepower. For anti-armor operations, the lascannon stands as the Guard's primary man-portable option. These weapons channel enormous energy through focusing arrays to produce a beam capable of penetrating vehicle armor at ranges exceeding 2 kilometers under optimal conditions. The massive power requirements necessitate either large backpack generators or direct connections to chimera power plants when deployed in defensive positions. A single well-placed lascannon shot can disable or destroy most orc vehicles and Chaos Predator tanks, though the weapon's lengthy recharge cycle between shots requires careful target selection and disciplined fire control. The autocannon occupies a middle ground between heavy bolters and lascannons, firing solid shells at high velocity to penetrate medium armor. These weapons excel against light vehicles and can threaten heavier targets with sustained fire to weak points. The relatively flat trajectory and consistent performance across different atmospheric conditions make autocannons particularly valued for defensive emplacements, where predictable ballistics simplify targeting calculations. During the Siege of Vrax, Death Corps heavy weapons teams equipped with autocannons proved instrumental in countering traitor chimera transports attempting to breach Imperial lines. For area denial and indirect fire support, mortar teams deploy compact, man-portable tubes capable of launching high-explosive shells in arcing trajectories over intervening terrain. Standard Guard mortars fire 80 shells with effective ranges between 500 m and 2 km depending on elevation and atmospheric conditions. The weapon's relatively light weight allows for rapid redeployment as battlefield conditions change, while its simple mechanical operation remains reliable even in environments where more complex systems might fail. Mortar teams typically operate from concealed positions behind friendly lines, coordinating fire patterns via Vox caster to maximize coverage of enemy approach routes. The missile launcher provides versatile support against both armored and infantry targets through interchangeable munitions. Crack missiles deliver shaped charges capable of penetrating vehicle armor, while frag missiles disperse lethal shrapnel across a wide area to eliminate infantry concentrations. More specialized variants include blind missiles that release smoke screens, incendiary warheads for area denial, and rare tank hunter missiles incorporating limited machine spirit guidance systems. The weapon's portability and adaptability make it a common sight in Guard formations operating in varied terrain where encounters with multiple threat types are anticipated. Heavy weapons teams require extensive training to operate effectively, with gunners and loaders developing almost symbiotic coordination through repeated drills and combat experience. The heavy weapons qualification course on Cadia included not just firing procedures, but also rapid disassembly, maintenance under battlefield conditions, and target prioritization exercises. Veterans note that a truly effective heavy weapons team communicates through minimal verbal cues, with loaders anticipating ammunition requirements and gunners adjusting firing patterns based on subtle shifts in enemy movement. Beyond these squad support weapons, individual guardsmen may receive specialized weapons based on tactical requirements and personal aptitude. These special weapons provide capabilities beyond standard lasguns, allowing small units to address specific threats without requiring heavy weapons team support. The distribution of special weapons typically follows a pattern of 1 or 2 per infantry squad, with additional concentrations in dedicated special weapons squads attached to company command. The Flamer represents one of the most psychologically devastating weapons in the Guard arsenal. These weapons project promethium fuel ignited at the nozzle, creating a stream of adhesive flame that continues burning after initial contact. Against unarmored targets, flamers prove almost universally lethal, while even protected enemies suffer from reduced visibility and the psychological impact of being engulfed in fire. In urban combat and tunnel clearance operations, flamers excel at eliminating enemies in concealed positions without requiring direct line of sight. During the Third War for Armageddon, Catachan flamer teams proved instrumental in clearing orc infiltrators from the underhive sectors of Hive Tempestus. For anti-armor operations at closer ranges than lascannons permit, the meltagun provides unmatched penetration capability. These weapons use submolecular thermal energy to literally melt through even the thickest vehicle plating, earning them the colloquial name tank killer among Guard veterans. The extremely short effective range, rarely exceeding 20 meters for optimal penetration, requires operators to approach dangerously close to armored targets, making meltagun assignments both prestigious and hazardous. The weapon's distinctive high-pitched whine often serves as the last sound heard by tank crews before their vehicle becomes a superheated coffin. The plasma gun occupies a unique position in the Guard arsenal, delivering power comparable to heavy weapons in a man-portable package. These weapons fire superheated plasma contained within electromagnetic fields, creating devastating effects against both armored vehicles and heavily protected infantry. This performance comes with significant risk. Plasma weapons have a notorious tendency to overheat during sustained fire, potentially resulting in catastrophic discharge that kills the operator. Despite this danger, competition for plasma gun assignments remains fierce in many regiments, with the weapon's distinctive blue-white discharge serving as a visible mark of elite status. The grenade launcher provides indirect fire capability at the squad level, lobbing explosive, fragmentation, or specialized munitions in arcing trajectories to strike enemies in cover. These weapons typically accept both crack grenades for anti-armor applications and frag grenades for anti-personnel use, with some patterns incorporating more exotic ammunition types including photon flash, smoke, and incendiary variants. The weapon's relatively quiet operation compared to other heavy weapons makes it particularly valued for operations requiring some degree of stealth, allowing troops to eliminate enemy positions without immediately revealing their own location. Standard issue grenades complement these primary weapons, providing guardsmen with limited area effect capabilities without requiring specialized training. The frag grenade represents the most common type, containing conventional explosives surrounded by a casing designed to fragment into lethal shrapnel upon detonation. These grenades prove effective against infantry in the open or in light cover, with a lethal radius of approximately 5–10 meters depending on the specific pattern and environmental conditions. The crack grenade, by contrast, uses shaped explosive charges to penetrate armor, making it effective against light vehicles and bunker positions when thrown with accuracy. Beyond these standard grenades, specialized types see distribution based on mission parameters. Smoke grenades release dense chemical clouds that block visual targeting systems, allowing troops to reposition under cover. Photon flash grenades emit intense light bursts that temporarily blind unprotected enemies and disrupt some targeting systems. Incendiary grenades disperse burning promethium across a limited area, creating temporary barriers and flushing enemies from entrenched positions. The rare and highly restricted vortex grenade, almost never issued to standard guard units, creates a temporary warp rift that consumes everything within its radius, regardless of armor or cover. For situations where ranged weapons prove impractical, the Guard issues various close combat implements. The ubiquitous bayonet transforms the standard lasgun into a spear-like weapon, extending reach in melee engagements and providing a psychological edge during charge actions. Most patterns feature a mono-molecular edge on one side for slicing attacks and a reinforced point designed to penetrate flak armor and light carapace protection. Bayonet training remains a fundamental aspect of Guard instruction, with regiments like the Mordian Iron Guard and Vestroyan Firstborn placing particular emphasis on coordinated bayonet charges as shock tactics. Combat knives serve as both tools and weapons, with designs varying significantly between regiments. The famous Catachan Devil Knife measures nearly 50 cm in length, functioning effectively as a short sword and reflecting the jungle fighter's emphasis on close-quarters combat. By contrast, the Cadian Pattern Combat Knife presents a more utilitarian design focused on reliability and ease of maintenance. These weapons typically incorporate a sawtooth section near the hilt for utility purposes and balanced weight distribution for throwing in emergency situations. The Leman Russ battle tank stands as the uncontested symbol of Imperial armored might, its silhouette recognizable to friend and foe alike across countless battlefields. Named for the Primarch of the Space Wolves, this main battle tank combines formidable firepower with practical durability, embodying the Imperium's approach to armored warfare. The standard Mars Alpha pattern features a low-profile hull manufactured from hardened ceramite and plasteel, with its most prominent feature being the massive turret housing the tank's primary weapon. The battle cannon that serves as the Leman Russ's main armament delivers devastating medium-range firepower capable of eliminating light vehicles with a single shot and severely damaging even heavier targets. Firing 120 high explosive shells, this weapon creates blast effects lethal to infantry caught within several meters of impact. The distinctive deep boom of a Leman Russ battle cannon echoes across Imperial battlefields as a reassuring sound to Guard infantry and a harbinger of doom to the Emperor's enemies. Supplementing this primary weapon, the standard Leman Russ configuration includes a hull-mounted heavy bolter and the option for sponson weapons mounted on each side of the chassis. These sponsons typically house heavy bolters or heavy flamers, though specialized patterns may incorporate plasma cannons, multi-meltas, or other support weapons. This arrangement provides the tank with 180-degree firing arcs on each side, allowing it to engage multiple targets simultaneously and deter infantry attacks from the flanks. The tank's interior accommodates a crew of 4, commander, gunner, loader, and driver. Unlike the more advanced vehicles of the Adeptus Astartes, the Leman Russ lacks sophisticated targeting cogitators or auto-loaders, relying instead on the skill of its human crew. This apparent limitation actually represents a deliberate design choice, allowing the vehicle to operate effectively even when damaged and making field repairs possible with limited resources. A Leman Russ with a damaged targeting system can still fight under manual control, while a more sophisticated tank might be rendered combat ineffective by similar damage. The Mars Alpha pattern represents the most common variant, but numerous specialized models serve particular tactical roles. The Leman Russ Demolisher replaces the standard battle cannon with a shorter barreled demolisher cannon that fires high-caliber shells designed to collapse buildings and fortifications. With a reduced range but dramatically increased destructive power, demolishers typically operate at the vanguard of urban assault operations, reducing enemy strongpoints to rubble before infantry advances. During the Third War for Armageddon, demolisher companies proved instrumental in clearing orc-held hab blocks in the outskirts of Hive Hellsreach. For anti-armor operations, the Leman Russ Vanquisher incorporates a longer, more accurate cannon with specialized armor-piercing ammunition. These tanks serve as dedicated tank hunters, engaging enemy armor at ranges exceeding those of standard battle cannons. The increased barrel length improves muzzle velocity, allowing Vanquisher rounds to penetrate even the frontal armor of most enemy tanks. The relative scarcity of vanquishers results from the complex manufacturing processes required for their specialized cannons, with many Forge worlds lacking the technical expertise to produce them in significant numbers. The Leman Russ Executioner represents one of the most feared variants, mounting a plasma destroyer cannon as its primary weapon. This devastating weapon fires superheated plasma blasts capable of vaporizing infantry squads and melting through vehicle armor with terrifying efficiency. This power comes at the cost of increased maintenance requirements and the ever-present risk of catastrophic overheating, particularly during sustained fire operations. Tank commanders operating executioners must carefully balance the weapon's destructive potential against the danger it poses to their own crews when pushed beyond safe operational parameters. For engaging infantry concentrations and light vehicles, the Leman Russ Punisher incorporates a massive rotary cannon capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute. The sheer volume of fire overwhelms enemy positions through saturation, effectively suppressing entire areas and shredding light armor through the cumulative impact of multiple hits. The distinctive sound of a Punisher Gatling cannon in operation, a continuous mechanical roar punctuated by the impact of countless shells, serves as a potent psychological weapon in itself, often causing enemy infantry to break cover simply to escape the relentless barrage. The Leman Russ Eradicator variant addresses the challenge of entrenched enemy infantry by employing a specialized cannon that fires shells containing potent chemical compounds. These shells detonate in airburst patterns, sending superheated gases and toxic chemicals into trenches, bunkers, and other fortified positions where conventional explosives might prove less effective. While technically less destructive than battle cannons against armored targets, Eradicators excel at clearing defensive lines and eliminating infantry regardless of their cover. Supporting these main battle tanks, the Imperial Guard fields an extensive array of artillery pieces designed to deliver overwhelming firepower from beyond direct line of sight. These vehicles typically operate from secured positions behind friendly lines, coordinating with forward observers to direct their devastating ordnance onto enemy concentrations, supply lines, and command centers. The Basilisk self-propelled artillery system represents the most numerous Imperial artillery piece, mounting a massive Earthshaker cannon on a modified Chimera chassis. With a maximum range exceeding 15 kilometers under optimal conditions, Basilisks can deliver punishing bombardments while remaining safely beyond the reach of most enemy counter-battery fire. The 132 Earthshaker shells create blast craters several meters across, with the shockwave alone capable of incapacitating infantry within a significant radius of impact. Basilisk batteries typically deploy in groups of 3 to 6 vehicles, allowing them to saturate target areas through coordinated fire patterns. The Manticore missile launcher system provides an alternative approach to long-range bombardment, trading the Basilisk's sustained fire capability for dramatically increased initial impact. Each Manticore carries a rack of 4 Storm Eagle rockets, massive missiles containing warheads that separate during terminal flight into multiple submunitions. A single Manticore salvo can devastate an area equivalent to several city blocks, making these weapons particularly effective against enemy formations caught in the open or light vehicle concentrations. The limited ammunition capacity, typically only one reload carried on board, means Manticores must be deployed strategically, their devastating firepower reserved for critical targets rather than routine suppression duties. For the most extreme artillery requirements, the Deathstrike missile launcher delivers apocalyptic destruction through a single massive missile containing either conventional high explosives or rare vortex warheads. These vehicles essentially function as mobile strategic weapons, capable of eliminating entire enemy formations or fortification complexes with a single strike. The Deathstrike's missile requires extensive preparation before launch, including calibration rituals performed by accompanying tech priests and the loading of targeting data through sanctified cogitators. This complex process means Deathstrikes rarely fire more than once during any given engagement, but the psychological impact of their deployment often influences enemy behavior even before the missile launches. The Wyvern suppression tank offers a different approach to artillery support, focusing on higher rates of fire rather than raw destructive power. Mounting quad Stormshard mortars capable of firing specialized shells at a rapid pace, Wyverns excel at suppressing enemy infantry and preventing movement across open ground. The computer-guided targeting systems allow these vehicles to maintain accurate fire even against moving targets, while the airburst ammunition ensures effectiveness against enemies in cover. During the Taros campaign, Elysian drop troops deployed alongside Wyvern batteries used this suppressive capability to pin Tau auxiliary forces in position for devastating flanking maneuvers. Beyond these dedicated artillery platforms, the Imperial Guard employs numerous specialized support vehicles designed to address specific battlefield challenges. The Hydra flak tank mounts quad autocannons with sophisticated targeting cogitators optimized for engaging aerial targets. Originally designed to counter enemy aircraft, the Hydra has proven equally effective against fast-moving light vehicles and infantry in open terrain. The rapid-firing autocannons create interlocking fields of fire that make evasion extremely difficult, while specialized ammunition types allow adaptation to various target profiles. The transport capabilities of the Imperial Guard center around several key vehicles designed to move infantry efficiently across the battlefield while providing varying degrees of protection and fire support. These vehicles form the backbone of mechanized guard regiments, allowing troops to deploy rapidly to threatened sectors and conduct swift assaults against enemy positions. The Chimera armored personnel carrier serves as the primary transport for Imperial Guard infantry squads, capable of carrying a 10-man squad in addition to its crew of 3. The standard configuration includes a turret-mounted multi-laser and hull-mounted heavy bolter, providing reasonable fire support while troops disembark or when operating as part of armored formations. The vehicle's amphibious capability allows it to cross rivers and lakes without requiring specialized engineering support, while its relatively simple mechanical systems facilitate field repairs using standard parts. Inside the Chimera, troops sit on bench seats along each side of the compartment, facing inward with their equipment secured in overhead netting. While not comfortable by civilian standards, the interior provides protection from small arms fire, shrapnel, and environmental hazards. Firing ports along each side allow transported troops to use their personal weapons while still inside the vehicle, though the limited visibility makes accurate targeting difficult. Most guardsmen prefer to disembark when engaging in sustained combat, using the Chimera as mobile cover rather than fighting from within. The Taurox represents a more recent addition to the Guard's transport pool, offering greater speed and maneuverability at the cost of reduced armor protection compared to the Chimera. The distinctive track units at each corner provide excellent all-terrain capability, allowing the Taurox to navigate difficult ground that would bog down conventional wheeled or tracked vehicles. Armed with a twin-linked autocannon in a remote-controlled turret, the Taurox provides respectable fire support despite its primary role as a transport. The vehicle's higher speed makes it particularly valuable for rapid reaction forces and reconnaissance units that prioritize mobility over maximum protection. For aerial transport capabilities, the Valkyrie assault carrier allows guard forces to deploy rapidly across significant distances and bypass ground-based obstacles. Capable of carrying a full infantry squad plus attached specialists, the Valkyrie combines transport capacity with impressive firepower from multiple hardpoints that can mount rocket pods, missile launchers, or heavy bolters. The aircraft's vertical take-off and landing capability allows operation from improvised landing zones, while its armored chassis provides protection against small arms fire and light anti-aircraft weapons. Valkyries typically operate in flights of 3 to 6 craft, providing mutual support during approach and extraction phases. The standard deployment procedure involves a rapid descent to the landing zone with suppressive fire from door gunners, followed by an almost immediate troop disembarkation through side doors or rear ramps. well-trained units can deploy from a hovering Valkyrie in under 15 seconds, minimizing the aircraft's vulnerability to enemy fire. For particularly dangerous insertions, troops may deploy using grav chutes while the Valkyrie remains at higher altitude, though this method requires specialized training and equipment not available to standard guard regiments. The Vendetta gunship variant of the Valkyrie chassis replaces the standard armament with 3 twin-linked lascannons, transforming the aircraft from a transport with supporting firepower into a dedicated gunship with transport capabilities. These modifications make the Vendetta particularly effective against enemy armor and light vehicles, allowing it to clear landing zones before deploying troops or provide extended fire support after extraction. During the Siege of Vrax, Vendetta gunships proved instrumental in eliminating traitor armor attempting to flank Imperial positions, their precision lascannon fire destroying dozens of renegade tanks that had evaded conventional artillery bombardment. At the apex of Imperial Guard armored might stand the super heavy vehicles, massive war machines that dominate the battlefield through overwhelming firepower and nearly impervious armor. These behemoths typically deploy only in the most significant engagements, where their impact on both enemy forces and friendly morale justifies the enormous logistical requirements needed to support their operations. The Baneblade Super Heavy Tank represents the most common of these massive vehicles, mounting armament equivalent to an entire tank company on a single chassis. The primary weapon, a massive 205 Baneblade cannon, can demolish enemy tanks with a single shot or reduce fortifications to rubble through sustained fire. Supplementing this main gun, the standard configuration includes a co-axial autocannon, hull-mounted demolisher cannon, and 3 twin-linked heavy bolters, plus sponson-mounted lascannons and additional heavy bolters or heavy flamers. This array of weapons allows the Baneblade to engage multiple targets simultaneously across different threat categories, from infantry concentrations to enemy super heavy vehicles. The interior of a Baneblade accommodates a crew of 10, including commander, driver, main gunner, secondary gunners, engineers, and communications specialists. These crew members operate in specialized compartments connected by narrow passageways, with armored bulkheads separating critical systems to prevent catastrophic damage from single penetrating hits. The command deck typically occupies the central portion of the upper hull, providing the commander with access to Vox communication systems, tactical displays, and direct observation through armored viewports. Unlike smaller tanks, Baneblades incorporate limited life support systems and crew facilities for extended operations, including chemical toilets, food storage, and emergency medical supplies. The psychological impact of Baneblade deployment extends to both enemy and friendly forces. For Imperial troops, the arrival of these massive vehicles provides a significant morale boost, the physical manifestation of the Imperium's industrial might and commitment to victory. For enemy forces, the distinctive rumble of Baneblade engines often precipitates preemptive retreats or desperate suicide attacks, as conventional anti-tank weapons typically prove ineffective against their thick armor. During the Macharian Crusade, Lord Solar Macharius famously deployed Baneblade companies at the vanguard of his advances into previously unexplored regions of space, using their imposing presence to secure planetary surrenders without requiring extensive infantry engagements. The Shadow Sword variant replaces the Baneblade's main cannon with a Volcano cannon, a massive energy weapon designed specifically for engaging Titan-class targets and other super heavy vehicles. The power requirements for this weapon are so substantial that much of the tank's interior houses generator systems and cooling apparatus, reducing secondary armament compared to the standard Baneblade. The Volcano cannon fires a beam of concentrated energy capable of penetrating virtually any known armor, with effective ranges exceeding 15 kilometers in optimal atmospheric conditions. During the Third War for Armageddon, Shadow Sword companies proved crucial in countering Orc Gargant assaults, destroying several of these massive war machines before they could breach Imperial defensive lines. The Stormlord variant focuses on anti-infantry operations, replacing the main battle cannon with a Vulcan Mega Bolter capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute. This devastating weapon creates a virtual wall of explosive shells, shredding infantry formations regardless of cover or armor. Additionally, the Stormlord's modified troop compartment can transport up to 40 Guardsmen, allowing it to function as both a heavy assault vehicle and a protected transport for elite infantry units. This combination makes the Stormlord particularly effective in urban combat environments, where its transported troops can secure buildings and confine spaces that the vehicle itself cannot access. The Imperial Guard approaches warfare with a pragmatism born of necessity. Unlike the lightning strikes of the Adeptus Astartes or the technological superiority of the Adeptus Mechanicus, Guard commanders must achieve victory through the effective application of overwhelming numbers and firepower. The infantry primer, distributed to officers throughout the Astra Militarum, establishes the fundamental principle underlying Guard tactics. Where the Space Marine applies precision, the Guardsman applies weight. Standard Imperial Guard infantry tactics begin with the establishment of firing lines, typically arranged in staggered formations to maximize firepower while minimizing vulnerability to enemy area weapons. The basic infantry squad serves as the building block of these formations, with 10 troopers arranged to provide overlapping fields of fire under the direction of their sergeant. When multiple squads deploy together, heavy weapons teams position themselves to cover likely enemy approach vectors, while special weapons operators spread throughout the line to address specific threats as they emerge. The disciplined volley remains a cornerstone of Guard infantry tactics, particularly among regiments like the Cadian Shock Troops and Mordian Iron Guard. On the command, first rank, fire, second rank, fire. Alternating lines of troops discharge their lasguns in coordinated salvos, creating a continuous barrage that overwhelms enemy positions through sheer volume rather than individual accuracy. Against lightly armored opponents like orcs or tyrannid gaunts, this approach proves remarkably effective. The concentrated energy discharges burning through chitinous plates or greenskin hide, despite the relatively low power of individual lasgun shots. When facing more heavily armored opponents, Guard tactics emphasize the concentration of special weapons fire. Plasma gunners and meltagun operators hold their fire until officers identify priority targets, then engage simultaneously to maximize damage before the enemy can respond. The Cadian 8th Regiment famously employed this approach during the defense of Kasr Jair, when a single infantry company eliminated an advancing column of Chaos Predator tanks by coordinating the fire of their 12 plasma guns on each vehicle in sequence, systematically burning through their armored hulls despite being significantly outgunned. The bayonet charge represents both a practical necessity and a psychological weapon in the Guard's tactical arsenal. When ammunition runs low or enemy forces close to melee range, officers order fixed bayonets, followed by a coordinated advance at running pace. The effectiveness of this tactic varies dramatically based on the opposing force. Against cultists or lightly armed rebels, a wall of bayonets often breaks enemy morale before actual contact. Against orcs or tyrannids, such charges typically result in heavy casualties, but may succeed through sheer weight of numbers when supporting fire has sufficiently weakened enemy formations. Defensive operations constitute a significant portion of Guard deployments, with Imperial forces frequently tasked with holding strategic positions against numerically superior enemies. In these situations, Guard doctrine emphasizes the construction of layered defenses beginning with forward observation posts, followed by minefields, razor wire entanglements, and finally hardened firing positions. The Death Corps of Krieg excel particularly in this form of warfare, their extensive training in trench construction and defensive operations making them ideal for protracted holding actions. A standard Guard defensive position typically arranges heavy weapons in interlocking fields of fire, with heavy bolters covering likely infantry approaches and lascannons or missile launchers positioned to engage enemy armor. Company commanders establish clear fields of fire by ordering the demolition of intervening structures or vegetation, creating killing grounds where advancing enemies must expose themselves to concentrated fire. Mortar teams deploy behind the main defensive line, their indirect fire capability allowing them to target enemies attempting to use cover to approach Imperial positions. Combined arms operations represent the ideal application of Guard military power, integrating infantry, armor, artillery, and air support into coordinated battle plans. In these operations, artillery batteries begin with preparatory bombardment to suppress enemy positions and damage fortifications. Armored formations then advance to secure key terrain features and eliminate hardened targets, while infantry follows to clear remaining resistance and establish control over the objective. Air support from Valkyries or Navy aircraft provides reconnaissance and strikes against targets of opportunity. The Canadian 39th Armored Regiment demonstrated the effectiveness of combined arms tactics during the Taros campaign when they coordinated with the Elysian 22nd Drop Regiment to capture a critical Tau water processing facility. Artillery batteries established a creeping barrage that forced Tau defenders into bunkers, while Leman Russ squadrons eliminated defensive turret emplacements. Valkyrie transports then deployed Elysian troops directly onto the facility's landing pads, bypassing outer defenses entirely. This synchronized application of different combat elements overwhelmed the Tau defenders despite their technological advantages, allowing Imperial forces to secure the objective with minimal casualties. Siege warfare remains one of the Imperial Guard's specialties, with regiments like the Death Corps of Krieg and the Armageddon Steel Legion maintaining specialized training and equipment for both offensive and defensive siege operations. When assaulting fortified positions, Guard doctrine prescribes a methodical approach, beginning with the establishment of secure supply lines and forward bases beyond enemy artillery range. Engineering corps then construct approach trenches in zigzag patterns to minimize vulnerability to enfilading fire, gradually advancing toward enemy positions, while artillery conducts sustained bombardment. The Siege of Vrax demonstrated the Imperial Guard's approach to siege warfare on a massive scale. Over 17 years of constant combat, Death Corps regiments established concentric rings of trenches around the rebellious fortress world, gradually tightening the noose despite fanatical resistance from Chaos cultists. Specialized siege tanks, including demolishers and thunderers, reduced hardened bunkers to rubble, while underground sapping operations planted explosive charges beneath enemy strongpoints. The methodical, relentless advance exemplified the Guard's approach to siege warfare, accepting high casualties as an inevitable cost of progress, while maintaining constant pressure on defenders until their eventual collapse. Urban combat presents particular challenges for Guard forces, requiring adaptations to standard tactics and often resulting in higher casualty rates than operations in open terrain. When fighting in city environments, Guard units operate in smaller, more independent formations, typically at the squad or platoon level rather than as full companies. Buildings provide both cover and concealment for defenders, requiring attackers to clear structures room by room while maintaining awareness of potential ambush points. The Armageddon Steel Legion developed specialized urban combat doctrines during the multiple wars for their hive world, emphasizing the use of mechanized infantry supported by sentinel walkers and light tanks. Their approach involves securing key intersections and high ground with armored elements, while infantry establishes strongpoints in defensible buildings. Rather than attempting to clear every structure, Steel Legion tactics focus on controlling movement corridors and isolating enemy forces in pockets that can be reduced through artillery fire or starvation. Anti-armor operations receive particular emphasis in Guard tactical doctrine, reflecting the vulnerability of infantry formations to enemy vehicles. When facing armored threats, Guard commanders employ a layered approach beginning with reconnaissance to identify enemy vehicle types and numbers. Anti-tank teams with missile launchers or lascannons deploy in concealed positions along likely approach routes, while artillery targets enemy repair and refueling facilities to degrade operational capacity. The Elysian Drop troops demonstrated effective anti-armor tactics during the Taros campaign against Tau Hammerhead tanks. Unable to match the Tau vehicles in direct confrontation, Elysian forces deployed from Valkyries onto elevated positions overlooking transport routes, using their height advantage to target the thinner top armor of passing tanks with missile launchers and demo charges. This asymmetric approach neutralized the Tau armor advantage without requiring heavy Imperial tanks that couldn't be transported by aircraft. The Guard's approach to combating different enemies varies significantly based on the specific threats presented. Against heretics and cultists, often encountered during planetary insurrections or compliance operations, Guard tactics emphasize psychological warfare alongside conventional military pressure. Commissars and Ministorum priests conduct public executions of captured rebels, while Vox casters broadcast messages offering amnesty to those who surrender and threatening retribution against civilian populations that harbor insurgents. These measures aim to isolate rebels from potential support while degrading morale. Militarily, operations against human rebels typically involve establishing control over critical infrastructure and population centers, followed by systematic sweep and clear operations to eliminate remaining resistance. The Scintillan 17th Light Infantry perfected these tactics during the pacification of Catachan, establishing fortified outposts throughout urban areas and conducting daily patrols to maintain visibility, while special weapons squads targeted identified rebel leaders. This combination of constant presence and selective elimination gradually eroded rebel capability without requiring the wholesale destruction of valuable infrastructure. Orcs present a fundamentally different challenge, requiring adaptations to standard Guard doctrine. The greenskin tendency toward frontal assaults plays to the Guard's defensive strengths, allowing for the establishment of killing fields where massed lasgun fire can thin advancing mobs before they reach Imperial lines. Heavy weapons prioritize larger orcs, particularly knobs and warbosses, as eliminating leadership figures can sometimes fragment the remaining forces into less coordinated bands. During the Third War for Armageddon, the Armageddon Steel Legion developed effective counter-orc tactics by exploiting the greenskin preference for direct engagement. Imperial forces would establish seemingly vulnerable outposts to draw orc attacks, then withdraw along predetermined routes that channeled pursuing orcs into prepared ambush zones, where pre-registered artillery fire and concealed heavy weapons teams could inflict maximum casualties. This approach leveraged the Guard's superior coordination against the orcs' greater individual combat prowess. Tyrannid invasions require perhaps the most significant adaptations to standard Guard doctrine. The Xenos creatures' hive mind coordination and biological adaptability negate many conventional tactical advantages. When facing Tyrannid forces, Guard commanders emphasize mobility and firepower concentration, avoiding fixed defensive positions that can be overwhelmed by sheer numbers or undermined by burrowing organisms. Flamers and heavy flamers receive priority distribution when combating Tyrannids, their area effect capability particularly effective against the smaller gaunt organisms that form the bulk of Tyrannid swarms. Artillery batteries load predominantly incendiary shells, creating burning barriers that can temporarily halt advancing organisms or force them into channels where waiting heavy weapons teams can maximize casualties. Veteran units learn to identify and target synapse creatures, the larger organisms that extend the hive mind's control, recognizing that eliminating these key nodes can render surrounding creatures temporarily disorganized and vulnerable. The Catachan 18th Swamp Rats developed specialized anti-Tyrannid tactics during the defense of Ulsonis Prime, using their jungle warfare expertise to establish camouflaged killing zones along likely approach routes. Rather than engaging the main Tyrannid swarms directly, Catachan teams would target isolated synapse creatures with concentrated demolition charges and heavy weapons fire, then withdraw before reinforcing organisms could respond. This guerrilla approach gradually degraded the hive mind's control over outlying areas, creating buffer zones around critical Imperial facilities. The Sabbat Worlds Crusade represents one of the most significant Imperial Guard campaigns in recent history, a decades-long effort to reclaim a cluster of systems that had fallen to chaos influence. Under the leadership of Warmaster Slato and later Warmaster Makaroth, Imperial forces systematically liberated planet after planet despite fierce resistance from both human cultists and Chaos Space Marines of the Blood Pact. The campaign demonstrated the Guard's ability to adapt tactics to different planetary environments and enemy compositions. On Con 3, the Vitrian Dragoons employed their desert warfare expertise to outflank entrenched Chaos positions using Chimera transports modified for extended range operations. On Fantine, a gas giant with floating habitation platforms, the Fantine Air Corps and elements of the Naval Air Wing conducted aerial assault operations against Blood Pact strongholds. The famous Tanith first and only utilized their stealth expertise for reconnaissance and assassination missions targeting enemy command structures. The Damocles Gulf Crusade pitted Imperial forces against the expanding Tau Empire, creating unique challenges for Guard commanders accustomed to more conventional enemies. The Tau's superior ranged firepower and mobility required adaptations to standard tactics, with Guard forces placing greater emphasis on night operations and close-quarters engagements where the aliens' advantages were minimized. During the battle for Daleth Prime, the Brimlock Dragoons demonstrated effective anti-Tau tactics by conducting rapid mechanized assaults during atmospheric electrical storms that disrupted Tau targeting systems. Chimera transports would deliver infantry directly into Tau defensive perimeters, allowing troops to engage at close quarters before the technologically superior aliens could establish optimal firing positions. These adaptations allowed Imperial forces to achieve significant gains despite the overall strategic stalemate that eventually led to the Crusade's conclusion. The Third War for Armageddon stands as perhaps the most massive planetary conflict involving Imperial Guard forces in recent history. When Warlord Gazkul Thraka returned with an even larger Orc-Wa than his previous invasion, billions of Guardsmen from dozens of regiments deployed to defend the vital industrial world. The conflict demonstrated the Guard's ability to conduct warfare across multiple environments simultaneously, from the Ash Wastes, where Steel Legion mechanized forces engaged Orc speed freaks, to the Hive cities, where urban combat specialists fought room to room against infiltrating greenskins. The defense of Hive Hellsreach exemplified the Guard's approach to high-intensity urban warfare. The 101st Armageddon Steel Legion established defensive zones around critical infrastructure, while Sentinel squadrons patrolled secondary corridors to provide early warning of Orc movements. Artillery batteries on upper Hive levels provided fire support, while Valkyrie squadrons conducted resupply operations to isolated defensive positions. Though the fighting inflicted massive casualties on Imperial forces, the Guard's coordination with Space Marine and Adeptus Mechanicus elements ultimately preserved the Hive despite weeks of continuous assault. In the ash waste surrounding the Hives, the 8th Armageddon Super Heavy Tank Company demonstrated the effectiveness of armored warfare against Orc vehicles. Baneblade squadrons would establish firing positions on elevated terrain, using their superior range to engage Orc battle wagons before the greenskins could close to effective firing distance. When Orc forces attempted to outflank these positions, pre-positioned Chimera transports would deliver infantry anti-tank teams to ambush the approaching vehicles, creating a coordinated defense in depth that maximized Imperial firepower advantages. The Commissar's bolt pistol discharged with a sharp crack, the round finding its mark in the temple of the retreating sergeant. As the body crumpled to the ground, the remaining squad members froze, their eyes locked on their former leader's remains. "The Emperor does not reward cowardice," the Commissar announced, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "First squad will advance. The enemy position will fall. Any man who steps backward will meet the Emperor's judgment through my hand." This scene, witnessed during the Siege of Vrax by a Death Corps Medici officer, exemplifies the most visible aspect of morale maintenance within the Imperial Guard. The Commissariat, formerly known as the Officio Praefectus, serves as the primary instrument of discipline within Guard formations. These stern political officers operate outside the standard chain of command, answering instead to the Departamento Munitorum and, ultimately, to the High Lords of Terra themselves. Commissars receive their training at Schola Progenium facilities, where orphaned children of imperial officials undergo rigorous indoctrination in imperial dogma alongside physical and martial training. Those who display appropriate temperament, combining absolute loyalty with unflinching resolve, are selected for commissarial training. This specialized curriculum includes not just tactical instruction, but intensive study of human psychology, focusing particularly on fear responses and methods to counteract them under battlefield conditions. The execution of wavering troops represents only the most dramatic aspect of a commissar's duties. Their day-to-day responsibilities include monitoring troop morale through regular inspections, reviewing Vox communications for signs of defeatism, and conducting impromptu interrogations of soldiers suspected of harboring doubts about imperial victory. Many commissars maintain networks of informants within their assigned regiments, creating an atmosphere where potential dissent might be reported before it can spread. This surveillance extends to the officer corps as well. A commissar possesses the authority to countermand or execute even high-ranking officers if they display insufficient aggression or dedication to imperial objectives. During the Taros campaign, Commissar Rain famously executed Colonel Varn of the 12th Talern Desert Raiders when the officer ordered a tactical withdrawal from an exposed position. Rain then personally led the regiment in a counterattack that, while suffering 78% casualties, successfully held the position for 3 additional days until reinforcements arrived. Despite their fearsome reputation, the most effective commissars understand that inspiration proves as valuable as intimidation. Commissar Sebastian Yarrick exemplified this balanced approach during the Second War for Armageddon, where he combined merciless punishment of deserters with personal heroism that inspired fanatical loyalty. After losing an arm to Orc warlord Uglehard, Yarrick refused evacuation, instead having a medici attach a crude tourniquet before returning to the front lines. This display of determination galvanized the defending forces, transforming a desperate defense into a fierce counterattack that ultimately drove the Greenskins from the Hades hive. Commissar Gaunt of the Tanith first and only represents another example of inspirational leadership. Rather than ruling exclusively through fear, Gaunt earned his regiment's loyalty by demonstrating personal courage, tactical acumen, and genuine concern for their welfare. This approach proved particularly effective with the Tanith, whose unique culture valued personal bonds and proven competence over institutional authority. Under Gaunt's leadership, the regiment achieved objectives that would have seemed impossible through intimidation alone, infiltrating enemy positions and conducting operations deep behind enemy lines, where traditional disciplinary measures would have been impractical. Beyond the commissariat, the imperial cult serves as perhaps the most significant force maintaining morale throughout the Astra Militarum. The ecclesiarchy maintains a substantial presence within guard formations, with priests accompanying regiments to battlefields across the galaxy. These clerics conduct daily prayer services, lead pre-battle liturgies, and administer last rites to the dying, creating a comprehensive spiritual framework that gives meaning to the immense suffering experienced by frontline troops. The standard uplifting primer, issued to all guardsmen alongside their equipment, contains not just tactical information, but extensive prayers, litanies, and devotional passages. Soldiers are expected to memorize these texts and recite them during appropriate moments, prayers for accuracy before firing, litanies of protection when facing enemy fire, and benedictions over weapons during maintenance. These ritualized behaviors serve multiple purposes, both calming nervous troops through familiar repetition and reinforcing the belief that their actions carry divine significance. For the average guardsman, the Imperial Creed provides essential psychological armor against the horrors of the 41st millennium. Facing alien monstrosities, demonic manifestations, or the corrupted followers of chaos, a soldier can find comfort in the belief that the Emperor protects the faithful and that death in his service guarantees salvation. This theological framework transforms potential trauma into meaningful sacrifice, allowing troops to function in circumstances that might otherwise induce psychological collapse. The Cadian 8th Regiment demonstrated the practical military value of faith during the defense of Kasserkraf against Chaos forces. When traitor Astartes of the Black Legion breached the primary defensive line, several Guard squads witnessed manifestations of demonic entities that caused immediate psychological distress. Ministorum priest Carmichael led the wavering troops in a recitation of the Litany of Divine Protection while advancing directly toward the demonic presence. This act of faith steadied the line long enough for Leman Russ tanks to move into supporting positions, their concentrated fire eventually banishing the warp entities. Faith provides particularly crucial support when facing enemies that attack not just the body, but the mind and soul. Standard Imperial Guard training includes limited information about chaos corruption, typically focusing on recognition and reporting protocols rather than detailed explanation. This deliberate restriction of knowledge helps prevent dangerous curiosity while ensuring troops can identify potential threats. When confronted with the reality of chaos, however, soldiers must rely on faith to shield their minds from influences designed to exploit doubt, fear, and ambition. During the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, the Vitrian Dragoons faced a chaos sorcerer who projected psychic assaults that induced hallucinations and paranoia among exposed troops. Regimental Confessor Durlin organized squads into prayer circles during rest periods, with soldiers maintaining physical contact while reciting the Emperor's prayer in unison. This practice created a rudimentary psychic defense that, while not completely effective, significantly reduced the sorcerer's influence and prevented the complete collapse of unit cohesion until Tempestus Scions could eliminate the threat. The psychological conditioning of Imperial Guardsmen begins long before they face actual combat, with most regiments undergoing extensive preparation for the horrors they will encounter. This training varies significantly based on the regiment's homeworld and anticipated deployment, but certain elements remain consistent across most Imperial Guard formations. Desensitization to violence forms a core component of this conditioning. Training exercises typically incorporate increasingly realistic combat simulations, often using actual corpses or condemned criminals as stand-ins for enemy forces. Cadians famously conducted live-fire exercises in which trainees navigated courses containing both practice targets and actual cultists captured during raids on the Eye of Terror. This exposure gradually normalizes the site of grievous injuries and death, reducing the psychological impact when encountered in actual combat. Dehumanization of enemy forces represents another standard conditioning technique. Training materials consistently depict Xeno's species as inherently evil and fundamentally alien, emphasizing physiological differences and cataloging atrocities committed against Imperial citizens. Human enemies receive similar treatment, with traitors and heretics portrayed as having surrendered their humanity through their rejection of the Emperor. This framing helps troops overcome natural hesitation to kill beings that resemble themselves, recasting the act as pest elimination rather than murder. Catachan jungle fighter conditioning takes a different approach, focusing on environmental awareness and threat recognition. Recruits learn to identify subtle signs of danger, disturbed vegetation, unusual animal behavior, changes in ambient sound, and respond with immediate, coordinated violence. This training creates soldiers who react to threat stimuli with near-automatic aggression, bypassing the cognitive processing that might otherwise introduce hesitation in combat situations. The Death Corps of Krieg employs perhaps the most extreme conditioning methods, beginning in early childhood with simulated combat in toxic environments. Young Krieg children wear miniature gas masks during training exercises, normalizing the equipment that will later become their permanent public face. Pain tolerance development features prominently, with progressive exposure to discomfort teaching recruits to function effectively despite injuries that would incapacitate soldiers from other regiments. By the time they receive their first combat deployment, Krieg troops have essentially had their self-preservation instincts redirected toward regiment preservation, valuing the survival of their unit above their individual lives. For regiments likely to face demonic manifestations, limited psychic conditioning may supplement standard training. Sanctioned psychers work with Ministorum priests to expose troops to controlled warp energies while simultaneously providing spiritual countermeasures. This careful exposure builds a form of psychological callus against the reality-distorting effects often experienced in proximity to warp entities. During the Plague Wars in the Ultramar system, the Cadian 13th underwent such conditioning before deployment against Death Guard forces, resulting in significantly lower rates of combat stress reaction when confronted with Nurgle manifestations compared to unprepared regiments. Beyond these formal conditioning methods, regimental traditions and battle honors serve as powerful forces for maintaining unit cohesion under extreme stress. These cultural elements transform abstract concepts like duty and loyalty into concrete, emotionally resonant experiences shared among soldiers who might otherwise have little in common. Regimental colors represent perhaps the most visible symbol of unit identity and pride. These consecrated banners bear the unit designation, homeworld iconography, and battle honors accumulated throughout the regiment's history. The physical object becomes a focus of regimental devotion, with elaborate ceremonies surrounding its display and protocols governing its protection in combat. The loss of regimental colors brings tremendous shame, while their preservation against enemy attempts at capture can become the central narrative of a battle regardless of strategic outcomes. During the defense of Enothian Prime against Drukhari raiders, the Mordian 12th Infantry found themselves surrounded and cut off from supporting units. When their position was finally relieved 3 days later, only 17 Guardsmen remained alive, all suffering severe injuries, but arranged in a defensive circle around their intact regimental colors. Survivor accounts described how watching comrades die to preserve the banner gave meaning to their sacrifice, transforming what might have been a futile last stand into a testament of Mordian determination that would inspire future generations. Battle honors accumulate throughout a regiment's service, recording significant actions and achievements that distinguish the unit. These honors manifest physically as ribbons and metalwork attached to the regimental colors, but their greater significance lies in the narratives they represent. Veterans recount the stories behind each honor to new recruits, creating a continuous oral tradition that places current hardships within a longer history of service and sacrifice. The Cadian 8th Regiment's battle honors included the Triple Skull of Kasser Halm, commemorating their defense of that fortress against 3 successive Chaos assaults during a previous Black Crusade. When the regiment faced a similar situation during the 13th Black Crusade, officers invoked this battle honor in their pre-engagement addresses, reminding troops that they stood in the footsteps of predecessors who had overcome comparable challenges. This historical connection provided both practical tactical insights and psychological reassurance that victory remained possible despite overwhelming odds. Regimental rituals surrounding combat operations reinforce unit identity while providing psychological preparation for the stresses of battle. These rituals vary enormously between regiments, reflecting their diverse cultural origins, but all serve similar functions in creating predictability and meaning within the chaos of warfare. Catachan jungle fighters practice blood naming before significant operations, with each soldier receiving a temporary name based on a notable kill or survival feat from their service record. This practice serves multiple purposes, identifying particularly skilled troops for specific tactical roles, creating friendly competition to earn more impressive names in future engagements, and establishing a psychological separation between the soldier's civilian and combat identities. Vistroyan firstborn officers conduct the counting of names before deployment, reciting their patrilineal ancestors who served in the same regiment. This genealogical ritual reminds each officer that they represent not just themselves, but a continuous family tradition of service, with ancestors watching from the emperor's side. The practice creates tremendous pressure to avoid bringing shame upon one's lineage, while simultaneously providing models of courage and sacrifice to emulate. The Death Corps of Krieg performs the Rite of Atonement before each engagement, a solemn ceremony in which company commanders recite the details of their homeworld's rebellion against the Imperium. This ritual concludes with the assembled troops responding, "We are the Emperor's judgment upon ourselves," reinforcing their foundational belief that each Krieg soldier personally bears responsibility for their ancestors' treason. This shared guilt creates a powerful drive to demonstrate loyalty through sacrifice, with troops competing to undertake the most dangerous assignments as opportunities for redemption. In combat situations where formal rituals become impractical, smaller unit traditions maintain cohesion at the squad and platoon level. These microcultures develop organically as soldiers face repeated life or death situations together, creating behavioral patterns that provide comfort through familiarity and reinforce interdependence. Veterans of the Tanith first and only developed a tradition of exchanging small cloth strips torn from their uniforms before high-risk operations. Each soldier would carry pieces from their squad mates, creating a physical reminder of their mutual reliance and a practical identification method for bodies if the operation went poorly. This custom emerged spontaneously during early deployments, but became standardized throughout the regiment as its psychological benefits became apparent. The effectiveness of these various morale maintenance systems, commissarial oversight, religious faith, psychological conditioning, and regimental traditions, becomes most apparent when they fail. During the Perdius campaign, the 31st Bronchian Longknives suffered a catastrophic morale collapse after witnessing the manifestation of a greater demon of Tzeentch. Despite the presence of commissars who executed dozens of retreating soldiers, the regiment broke formation and fled, resulting in the loss of a strategic manufacturing center and the subsequent decimation of the regiment as punishment. The Tempestus Scions represent the pinnacle of human military achievement within the Astra Militarum, elite soldiers whose training, equipment, and operational doctrine set them apart from standard guard regiments. Formally designated as Militarum Tempestus, these troops undergo selection and training processes that transform them from ordinary humans into warriors capable of executing missions that would be suicidal for conventional forces. Their origins trace back to the Schola Progenium, the imperial institution responsible for educating orphaned children of imperial servants. From these orphans, known as progena, the most physically capable and mentally resilient candidates are identified for Tempestus training. The Schola's Tempestus program subjects these young recruits to a training regimen that would kill many adult guardsmen. Physical conditioning begins before dawn each day, with progena running dozens of kilometers in full equipment loads regardless of weather conditions. Combat instruction covers everything from unarmed techniques to proficiency with every weapon in the Imperial arsenal. Academic education includes tactical theory, xenobiology, and technical skills far beyond those taught to standard guardsmen. Perhaps most importantly, psychological conditioning instills absolute loyalty to the Imperium above all personal considerations. Tempestus Scions are instantly recognizable on the battlefield by their distinctive carapace armor, form-fitted plates of ceramite and plasteel that provide protection approaching that of Adeptus Astartes power armor, while remaining light enough for unaugmented humans to wear effectively. This armor typically appears in dark colors, with regimental insignia displayed prominently on the chest plate and shoulder guards. The enclosed helmet includes enhanced auto senses and rebreather apparatus, allowing operations in toxic environments without additional equipment. The standard armament for Tempestus Scions centers around the Hellgun, an enhanced las weapon that fires higher energy beams than standard lasguns. These weapons connect to backpack power supplies rather than using conventional power packs, providing both increased shot strength and greater operational capacity before recharging. This additional firepower allows Scions to engage threats that would require heavy weapons support for conventional guard units. For specialized operations, Scions may deploy with hotshot volley guns, plasma weapons, or melta-guns depending on anticipated resistance. Tempestus Scion regiments, properly termed Militarum Tempestus regiments, organized differently from standard guard formations. The basic tactical unit is the combat squad, typically comprising 5 Scions led by a Tempester. 4 combat squads form a command squad led by a Tempester Prime, roughly equivalent to a standard guard platoon, but with significantly greater combat effectiveness. These smaller units reflect the Scion's operational focus on precision strikes rather than massed engagements, allowing them to deploy via Valkyrie or Taurox Prime transports with minimal logistical footprint. The operational doctrine of the Tempestus Scions emphasizes rapid insertion, objective completion, and extraction rather than territorial control. Typical missions include elimination of enemy leadership, destruction of critical infrastructure, recovery of sensitive assets, and establishment of landing zones for larger Imperial forces. The 55th Alphic Hydras demonstrated this approach during the Damocles Gulf Crusade, when they deployed via high-altitude grav chute insertion to eliminate a Tau command post that had been coordinating successful resistance against conventional Guard advances. The entire operation lasted less than 30 minutes from insertion to extraction, with all 20 Tau officers eliminated and their communication equipment destroyed. The relationship between Tempestus Scions and conventional Guard forces often proves complex. While officially part of the Astra Militarum command structure, Scions frequently operate under direct orders from inquisitorial or other Imperial authorities, bypassing the standard chain of command. This arrangement can create tension when Scion operations impact broader Guard operations, or when they receive priority for limited resources like air transport or artillery support. Additionally, the superior equipment and training of Tempestus forces sometimes generates resentment among standard Guardsmen, who may view the Scions as privileged elites disconnected from the realities of conventional warfare. Despite these tensions, effective commanders recognize the value of integrating Tempestus capabilities into broader operational planning. During the Third War for Armageddon, Lord General Kurov coordinated conventional Steel Legion advances with precision strikes by the 86th Deltic Dragons, using the Scions to eliminate Orc mechboys who had been constructing increasingly sophisticated defense works. This combined arms approach leveraged the unique strengths of both forces, the Steel Legion's mechanized warfare expertise and the Scions' ability to execute targeted elimination of high-value targets. The Militarum Tempestus maintains its own distinct regimental traditions and battle honors, though these remain less visible to the broader Imperium than those of famous Guard regiments. The 43rd Iottan Dragons carry the honor, Silent Saviors of Calendis, commemorating an operation where they eliminated a Genestealer cult leadership that had infiltrated the planetary government, preventing a full-scale uprising without the population ever learning of the threat. The 9th Iottan Gorgons maintain the tradition of voiced death before operations, with each Scion taking a vow of silence until the mission concludes, communicating exclusively through hand signals and data slate transmissions. While the Tempestus Scions represent the elite of fully human soldiers in the Astra Militarum, the Imperial Guard also incorporates various abhuman auxiliaries, stable human subspecies adapted to specific environmental conditions over thousands of years of isolation. These abhumans occupy an uncomfortable position in Imperial society, officially sanctioned as loyal subjects of the Emperor yet viewed with suspicion, and often outright discussed by many pure-strain humans. Their specialized physiological adaptations, however, provide capabilities that conventional troops cannot match, making them valuable assets despite cultural prejudices. Ratlings stand among the most numerous and widely deployed abhuman auxiliaries. Descended from human colonists who settled high-gravity worlds, Ratlings evolved into a subspecies characterized by small stature, rarely exceeding 1.5 meters in height, stocky builds, and enhanced metabolism. Their most valuable military trait lies in their exceptional eyesight and natural marksmanship, making them ideal for sniper and reconnaissance roles within Guard formations. A typical Ratling sniper carries a modified long laws with enhanced scope and stabilization features, allowing them to engage targets at ranges that would challenge even veteran human marksmen. Their diminutive size proves advantageous for concealment, enabling them to establish firing positions in locations that would not accommodate full-sized humans. During the Siege of Vrax, Rattling snipers of the 15th Valhalla Regiment established positions in collapsed drainage culverts, systematically eliminating traitor artillery spotters and significantly reducing the accuracy of enemy bombardment against Imperial lines. Beyond their combat role, ratlings often serve as unofficial morale officers through their culinary skills. Their enhanced metabolism creates a constant hunger that has led to the development of impressive cooking abilities, transforming standard guard rations into palatable meals that provide welcome relief from battlefield hardships. This talent, while not officially recognized in Imperial tactical doctrine, nonetheless contributes significantly to unit cohesion and morale in extended deployments. The cultural integration of ratlings into guard formations varies considerably between regiments. Vistroyans typically treat them with formal respect while maintaining social distance, while Catachans often develop closer bonds through shared appreciation for fieldcraft and environmental awareness. Certain regiments, particularly those with strong purist tendencies like the Death Corps of Krieg, refuse rattling attachments entirely, preferring to develop human snipers despite the additional training requirements. At the opposite physiological extreme from ratlings stand the Oghren, massive abhumans descended from colonists on high-gravity worlds, who evolved into hulking warriors standing 2.5 to 3 meters tall with proportionate strength and resilience. Their physical development came at the cost of cognitive capability, with most Oghren possessing childlike intellects capable of understanding only simple concepts and direct instructions. This limitation restricts their tactical flexibility, but does nothing to diminish their effectiveness in their primary role as shock troops and close-quarters specialists. The standard armament for Oghren auxiliaries centers around the Ripper gun, a shotgun-like weapon scaled to their massive proportions. These weapons fire shells the size of human fists, creating devastating effects against infantry at close range, while remaining simple enough for Oghren to operate and maintain. In melee combat, Oghren often employ massive clubs or metal shields that would be unwieldy for normal humans, but serve as effective one-handed weapons for their enhanced physiology. Oghren typically deploy in dedicated squads of 4-6 individuals led by a bowneed, an Oghren with slightly higher intelligence who can communicate more effectively with human officers. These squads attach to standard guard formations as assault specialists, breaching enemy positions that would require heavy weapons support for conventional troops to overcome. During the liberation of Benediction, Oghren squads attached to the Mordian 12th Infantry successfully breached reinforced bunker complexes that had repelled multiple conventional assaults, using their massive strength to tear open armored doors that conventional explosives had failed to penetrate. The psychological impact of Oghren deployment extends beyond their direct combat effectiveness. Their intimidating physical presence often demoralizes enemy forces, particularly those unaccustomed to their massive stature. Conversely, their presence can bolster friendly morale, with human guardsmen drawing confidence from fighting alongside such physically imposing allies. The Cadian 8th Regiment incorporated this effect into their tactical doctrine, positioning Oghren squads at key points along defensive lines, where their visibility would maximize both enemy intimidation and friendly reassurance. For Oghren who display exceptional loyalty and basic aptitude, the Adeptus Mechanicus offers enhancement through the biochemical Oghren neural enhancement procedure, producing what are colloquially known as Bullgrin. This process increases cognitive function while leaving physical capabilities intact, allowing the recipient to understand more complex instructions and operate specialized equipment. Bullgrin typically deploy with massive ballistic shields that can form mobile cover for advancing infantry, transforming them from pure assault troops into tactical assets capable of supporting various battlefield roles. The relationship between Oghren and human guardsmen often develops paternal characteristics, with squad leaders adopting simplified language and clear instructions when directing their abhuman charges. This approach plays to the Oghren's childlike desire for approval and simple worldview in which the Emperor is good, enemies are bad, and following orders leads to rewards. Many veterans report that despite initial misgivings about serving alongside abhumans, they came to value their Oghren squadmates for their unfailing loyalty and straightforward courage in situations where more intelligent troops might hesitate due to self-preservation instincts. Beyond these common abhuman types, the Imperial Guard occasionally employs more specialized or regionally specific variants. Felinids, humans with feline characteristics, occasionally serve as scouts in specific theaters. Troths, adapted for aquatic environments, provide valuable capabilities during amphibious operations. The Adeptus Administratum maintains extensive catalogs of sanctioned abhuman strains, though many remain restricted to their homeworlds rather than being actively recruited for Imperial service. The Militarum Auxilia encompasses various supplementary forces that support standard Guard operations without meeting the standards required for regular regiments. These forces include conscript platoons, penal legions, and planetary defense forces, each fulfilling specific roles within the broader Imperial military structure, while operating under different regulations and expectations than standard Guard units. Conscript platoons represent the most basic level of Imperial military manpower, consisting of hastily trained civilians pressed into service during emergency situations. Unlike standard Guardsmen who receive months or years of training before deployment, conscripts might receive as little as a few days of basic instruction before being issued equipment and assigned to combat operations. Their primary value lies in sheer numbers rather than individual effectiveness, providing mass that can absorb enemy fire or hold ground through weight of bodies rather than tactical skill. The equipment issued to conscripts typically consists of whatever remains available after supplying regular forces, often outdated lasgun patterns, incomplete flak armor sets, and minimal supporting weapons. Training focuses on absolute basics: how to fire their weapon, recognize common enemy types, and respond to simple orders. More complex tactical concepts receive minimal attention, with officers assuming that most conscripts will not survive long enough to require advanced skills. Command structures for conscript formations emphasize direct oversight by experienced officers and non-commissioned officers, typically at a higher ratio than regular units. Commissars attach to conscript platoons at approximately twice the rate of standard formations, reflecting the greater need for discipline enforcement among troops with minimal investment in military identity or unit cohesion. During the defense of Cadia against the 13th Black Crusade, conscript formations received 1 commissar per 50 troops compared to the standard ratio of 1 per company in regular regiments. Despite their limitations, conscript forces have achieved significant victories when properly employed and supported. During the Siege of Vrax, conscript formations drawn from nearby agri-worlds successfully held secondary trenches against traitor militia forces, freeing veteran Death Corps units to counter more dangerous threats. Their effectiveness stemmed not from individual skill, but from careful positioning within a broader defensive system, where their limitations could be mitigated and their numerical advantage maximized. Penal legions represent another category of auxiliary forces, composed of convicted criminals, offered the opportunity to redeem themselves through military service. These units draw from imperial prisons, penitentiary worlds, and local detention facilities, creating formations with diverse criminal backgrounds, united only by their desire to survive their sentence and potentially earn redemption. The infamous Last Chancers, under Colonel Schieffer, represent perhaps the most renowned example, though thousands of similar units serve throughout the Imperium. Unlike standard Guard forces organized around consistent training and equipment, penal legions emphasize individual skills derived from criminal backgrounds. Former gangers might serve as close-quarters specialists, while embezzlers might manage logistics or communications. This approach attempts to leverage existing capabilities rather than investing in conventional training for troops considered expendable. Equipment follows similar principles, with penal legionnaires receiving whatever weapons match their demonstrated aptitudes rather than standard issue patterns. Control mechanisms for penal legions include both conventional military discipline and specialized restraints. Many units employ explosive collars that officers can detonate remotely if a legionnaire attempts desertion or shows signs of rebellion. Others use chemical conditioning that requires regular administration of suppression drugs to prevent withdrawal symptoms. Commissars assigned to penal legions typically receive additional authority compared to their counterparts in standard regiments, including summary execution rights for infractions that might merit lesser punishments in conventional units. Despite these harsh controls, penal legions occasionally develop unexpected unit cohesion through shared hardship and the promise of potential redemption. The 13th Savlar Chem Dogs, originally formed from chemical stimulant addicts from the penal world of Savlar, eventually developed into a semi-regular formation with distinctive tactics leveraging their familiarity with toxic environments. After several generations of service, the unit received conditional regular status, though their origins remain reflected in their regimental culture and the chemical dependency that still characterizes most of their troops. Planetary defense forces constitute the most numerous but least standardized component of the Militarum Auxilia. Every inhabited world in the Imperium maintains some form of local defense force, ranging from professional military organizations on strategically valuable planets to little more than armed militia on less developed worlds. These forces operate under the authority of planetary governors rather than the Departmentum Unitorum, creating significant variation in training, equipment, and doctrine. The primary purpose of PDF forces is to maintain local security and provide initial resistance against external threats until Imperial Guard or other reinforcements can arrive. This role requires balancing combat readiness against the risk of creating forces powerful enough to support planetary secession. Most Imperial worlds resolve this tension by maintaining PDF forces strong enough to handle minor threats, while keeping the best equipment and training facilities dedicated to raising guard regiments for off-world service. When planetary invasions or major insurrections occur, PDF forces typically integrate into the Imperial Guard command structure, serving as auxiliary troops under guard officers. This arrangement provides local knowledge and additional manpower, while ensuring loyal oversight of forces whose ultimate allegiance might be questioned. During the Damocles Gulf Crusade, Tau invaders specifically targeted this command integration, using propaganda and precision strikes to separate PDF units from their Imperial Guard leadership and encourage defection or surrender. The combat effectiveness of PDF forces varies dramatically based on their homeworld's military tradition and strategic importance. The Cadian Interior Guard, the PDF of Cadia before its fall, maintained standards approaching those of actual Cadian shock troops, with comprehensive training programs and equipment only marginally inferior to that issued to Guard regiments. By contrast, the defense forces of many agri-worlds might have little more than basic lasguns and flak vests, with training limited to occasional exercises conducted by retired Guard veterans. For specialized operational environments, the Astra Militarum maintains regiments with equipment and training optimized for specific battlefield conditions. These specialized formations deploy as complete units rather than providing support elements to standard regiments, allowing them to execute missions that would be impossible for conventionally equipped forces. The Elysian drop troops exemplify this specialization, focusing entirely on aerial insertion operations. Drawn from the low-gravity world of Elysia, these troops undergo extensive training in high-altitude grav-shoot deployment, aircraft operations, and rapid strike tactics. Their distinctive lightweight carapace armor features reinforced spinal protection to absorb the impact of landings, while their equipment loadouts emphasize mobility over raw firepower, typically including compact las carbines rather than full-length lasguns, and man-portable heavy weapons that can be broken down for transport. Elysian operational doctrine centers around the concept of vertical envelopment, bypassing enemy ground defenses by deploying directly onto objectives from aircraft. This approach requires precise coordination between transport pilots and ground forces, with drops often occurring under enemy fire or in adverse weather conditions. During the Taros campaign, the Elysian 23rd Regiment executed a night drop during a major dust storm, using the environmental conditions to mask their approach from Tau sensor systems. Despite losing nearly 30% of their force to scattered landings and isolated firefights, the regiment successfully captured their designated water processing facility, cutting off a critical resource from Tau forces. The equipment configuration of Elysian regiments reflects their specialized role, with notably fewer heavy vehicles than standard Guard formations. Most heavy support comes from Valkyrie and Vulture gunships operating in close coordination with ground troops, providing mobile firepower that doesn't require ground transport. When heavier equipment proves necessary, Elysians employ specially modified Sentinel Walkers and Toros, rapid assault vehicles that can be transported by aircraft and deployed via specialized drop canopies. The Harakoni Warhawks represent another airborne specialized regiment, though with distinct tactical differences from the Elysians. Originating from the high-gravity, low-atmosphere hive world of Harakin, Warhawks specialize in high-altitude, low-opening insertions from the upper atmosphere. Their homeworld's environmental conditions produce naturally resilient soldiers with exceptional lung capacity and resistance to decompression effects, allowing them to operate at altitudes that would incapacitate troops from normal gravity worlds. Warhawk equipment centers around their signature grav chutes, more sophisticated than standard Imperial models, and pressurized carapace armor that functions as a partial pressure suit during high-altitude operations. Their primary weapons typically include bullpup pattern lasguns that maintain full power while offering reduced length for maneuverability in confined spaces after landing. For heavy support, Warhawks favor lightweight missile launchers and plasma weapons that offer maximum impact with minimal transport weight. The officer corps of the Astra Militarum represents perhaps the most diverse leadership structure in the Imperium, drawing individuals from countless cultural backgrounds and training traditions. Unlike the Adeptus Astartes, whose officers emerge from within their own ranks through proven combat ability, Guard officers originate from multiple sources, some rising through merit from the enlisted ranks, others entering directly through aristocratic privilege, and many receiving formal education through the Schola Progenium. At the highest levels stand the Lord Generals, individuals who command entire army groups comprising millions of troops across multiple systems. These senior officers typically emerge from one of two backgrounds, either career soldiers who have demonstrated exceptional tactical acumen and political reliability over decades of service, or scions of powerful noble houses whose family connections secured their advancement. The practical effectiveness of these officers varies tremendously, with merit-promoted commanders generally demonstrating superior tactical flexibility, while politically appointed aristocrats often excel at navigating the Byzantine imperial command structure to secure resources for their forces. Lord General Castor of the Cadian Eighth exemplifies the career soldier path, having risen from a line officer position through demonstrated competence across multiple campaigns. His intimate familiarity with frontline conditions informed his strategic decisions, particularly his emphasis on maintaining reserve forces to exploit breakthrough opportunities. By contrast, Lord General Mikkel von Gustavus of the Mordian 12th secured his position largely through his family's connections to the sector governor, though he subsequently proved his worth through careful study of military theory and surrounding himself with experienced staff officers to compensate for his limited combat experience. Below the Lord Generals serve generals, lieutenant generals, and major generals, each typically commanding progressively smaller formations. A standard general might oversee several regiments grouped into a battle group, while a major general might command a single regiment or specialized formation. At these levels, battlefield experience becomes increasingly important, with officers expected to make rapid tactical decisions based on direct observation rather than relying primarily on strategic analysis. The regimental command level, typically a colonel, represents perhaps the most critical leadership position in the Imperial Guard structure. These officers must translate strategic objectives into practical battlefield actions while maintaining the morale and combat effectiveness of their troops. Unlike higher-ranking generals who might direct operations from command centers far from the front lines, colonels frequently find themselves close enough to the fighting to face personal danger, particularly in regiments with aggressive combat doctrines. Colonel Strachan of the Catachan II exemplifies the hands-on leadership style common among successful regimental commanders. Despite extensive bionic replacements from injuries sustained in previous engagements, Strachan consistently leads from the front, personally participating in assaults against key enemy positions. This approach builds tremendous loyalty among his troops while providing him with direct situational awareness that no Vox report could match. During the defense of Fortress Carcassonne against Tyranid forces, Strachan personally led a counterattack against a Carnifex that had breached the perimeter, engaging the massive creature in close combat while his troops concentrated fire on its vulnerable points. Company commanders, typically captains, represent the level at which tactical theory meets practical application. These officers must implement the colonel's broader battle plan while adapting to local conditions and enemy responses. Effective captains develop intimate knowledge of their troops' capabilities and limitations, allowing them to assign tasks appropriately and anticipate performance under stress. The Standard Guard Company comprises 100-150 troops organized into 3 to 5 platoons, though this structure varies between regiments based on their homeworld traditions and combat specialization. Platoon commanders, usually lieutenants, operate at the most granular level of commissioned leadership. These junior officers, often young and relatively inexperienced, must translate company-level objectives into specific tasks for individual squads while maintaining direct oversight of troops in combat conditions. The effectiveness of a lieutenant often depends less on tactical brilliance than on basic competence and the ability to build trust with both their subordinate sergeants and their superior captain. A platoon typically comprises 3 to 4 squads plus attached support elements, totaling 30-50 guardsmen, depending on regimental organization. The training of Imperial Guard officers varies dramatically based on their origin. Those emerging from the Schola Progenium receive perhaps the most standardized education, with young progena identified for officer training undergoing intensive instruction in imperial military history, tactical theory, leadership principles, and practical field exercises. The Schola's officer track emphasizes both technical competence and ideological reliability, producing leaders who understand both how to accomplish military objectives and why those objectives serve the Emperor's will. For officers rising from aristocratic backgrounds, training often begins with private tutors or prestigious military academies maintained by their homeworld's nobility. The quality of this education varies tremendously, with institutions like the Cadian Whiteshield's Academy providing rigorous practical training, while others offer little more than ceremonial instruction in parade ground procedures and social etiquette. Recognizing this inconsistency, many regiments require aristocratic officers to complete supplementary training with veteran non-commissioned officers before assuming command responsibilities. Merit-promoted officers who rise from the enlisted ranks typically receive abbreviated formal training focused on administrative procedures and tactical theory to supplement their existing practical experience. These officers often excel at small unit leadership, but may initially struggle with the strategic planning and administrative responsibilities of higher command. The Departmento Munitorum maintains officer candidate schools on major garrison worlds specifically to address this gap, providing standardized instruction to promising non-commissioned officers identified for promotion. Regardless of their origin, all Imperial Guard officers must navigate the complex relationship between military necessity and political reality. Commissars attached to command staff monitor officers for any sign of insufficient zeal or deviation from imperial doctrine, while ministorum priests provide spiritual guidance that sometimes conflicts with tactical imperatives. Successful commanders learn to incorporate these influences without allowing them to compromise operational effectiveness, often through careful management of information flow and strategic deployment of imperial rhetoric. Beyond the traditional command hierarchy, effective battlefield control in the Imperial Guard depends heavily on specialized personnel who facilitate communication, provide intelligence, and maintain the connection between scattered units across vast distances. Chief among these specialists are the astropaths, sanctioned psychers whose telepathic abilities enable communication across interstellar distances. Each astropath undergoes the soul-binding ritual on Terra, their psychic essence briefly touching the Emperor's mind in a process that simultaneously strengthens their abilities and provides some protection against warp predation. This ritual leaves them physically blind, but enhances their psychic senses, allowing them to project thoughts across the void between stars. Within guard formations, astropaths typically attach to headquarters elements at the regimental level and above, providing the primary means of communication with distant commands and other Imperial forces. The practical limitations of astropathic communication significantly impact guard operations. Messages transmitted through the warp may arrive instantly, after considerable delay, or distorted beyond recognition, depending on local warp conditions. This uncertainty necessitates the development of robust communication protocols, with important messages often sent multiple times through different astropaths to ensure delivery. During the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, Warmaster Makaroth established a relay system of astropathic chambers on secured worlds, creating a network that improved reliability by limiting the distance each transmission needed to travel. For battlefield communication at shorter ranges, the Imperial Guard relies on voxcasters, radio-like devices that transmit encrypted signals between units. Standard Guard platoons include at least one Vox operator responsible for maintaining contact with company command, while company headquarters maintain more powerful units for communication with regimental staff. The effective range of these devices varies based on environmental conditions, with urban environments and certain atmospheric phenomena creating dead zones where signals cannot penetrate. To overcome these limitations, guard formations employ multiple redundant communication methods. Signal flares provide visual indicators visible across considerable distances, while runners physically carry messages when electronic means fail. Some regiments maintain specialized messenger units using fast-moving vehicles or even trained animals native to their homeworlds. The Attilan Rough Riders famously employed juvenile groks trained to return to their handlers when released, carrying message capsules attached to their harnesses, a technique that proved invaluable during the Battle of Seraph's Fall when electromagnetic interference rendered Vox communication impossible. Sanctioned psychers serve multiple functions beyond communication in guard command structures. These carefully monitored individuals, their powers considerably weaker than full astropaths, provide tactical intelligence by sensing enemy movements beyond visual range or detecting warp anomalies that might indicate chaos activity. During active combat, battle psychers may deploy limited offensive abilities against enemy positions, causing confusion or panic among opposing forces, though such actions carry significant risk of attracting unwanted attention from the warp. The deployment of sanctioned psychers remains strictly regulated, with each individual accompanied by a handler from the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, who monitors for signs of corruption or possession. These handlers carry specialized equipment for neutralizing psychers who lose control, ranging from psycho-active restraints to execution devices that can be triggered remotely. Despite these precautions, many guard officers remain deeply uncomfortable with psycher support, requesting their assistance only when conventional means prove insufficient. The logistics of supplying Imperial Guard forces across galactic distances represents perhaps the most daunting challenge facing the Departamento Munitorum. A single regiment in active combat operations may require hundreds of tons of supplies daily: ammunition, food, medical supplies, replacement equipment, and fuel for vehicles. Multiplied across thousands of active regiments spread throughout the Imperium, this logistical demand becomes almost incomprehensibly vast. To manage this challenge, the Munitorum employs a hierarchical supply system centered around key distribution hubs in each sector. Major Forge worlds produce standardized equipment that flows to these hubs, where Munitorum logisticians allocate resources based on strategic priority and availability. From these sector warehouses, supplies move to subsector distribution points, and finally to forward supply bases serving active war zones. This entire process may take months or even years depending on distance and warp travel conditions, requiring commanders to plan requisitions far in advance of actual need. The standardization of equipment represents a critical element in this logistical system. The ubiquitous lasgun exemplifies this approach. While dozens of variant patterns exist, all use interchangeable power packs and share key components that can be mass-produced across thousands of worlds. This standardization extends to vehicle parts, ammunition calibers, and even the dimensions of ration packs, creating a system where supplies manufactured in one segment of the galaxy can support troops fighting in another without compatibility issues. When standard supply lines prove insufficient, Guard commanders must improvise alternative solutions. Requisitioning resources from local populations, officially termed emergency supply acquisition, but commonly known as foraging among troops, provides one option, though this approach risks alienating civilian populations and depleting resources needed for planetary recovery after combat operations conclude. More proactive commanders establish manufacturing capabilities within their area of operations, converting existing industrial facilities to produce ammunition or repair damaged equipment. The Armageddon Steel Legion perfected these adaptive logistics during the prolonged defense of their homeworld, converting underhive manufacturing facilities to produce LAW's power packs and establishing synthetic food production in secure zones when agricultural regions fell to orc forces. This self-sufficiency proved crucial when warp storms temporarily prevented reinforcement fleets from reaching the besieged planet, allowing Guard forces to continue effective resistance until supply lines reopened. Battlefield command structures within the Imperial Guard balanced the need for centralized coordination against the practical limitations imposed by combat conditions. The theoretical chain of command flows cleanly from regimental headquarters through company and platoon commanders to squad sergeants, but the reality of warfare frequently disrupts this neat hierarchy. Effective Guard officers develop flexible command systems that continue functioning when key leaders become casualties or communication systems fail. The company level typically represents the most important tactical formation, with captains exercising significant autonomy in executing their assigned objectives. These officers receive mission parameters from regimental command, but determine specific approaches based on local conditions and the capabilities of their troops. This autonomy becomes particularly important when unexpected developments require rapid adaptation without time for consultation with higher authorities. During the Taros campaign, Captain Harkin of the Elysian 23rd faced this situation when his company's drop zone proved heavily defended despite intelligence reports indicating minimal resistance. Rather than proceeding with the planned frontal assault, Harkin redirected his forces to an alternate landing area 5 kilometers distant, then approached the objective from an unexpected direction. This initiative allowed his company to complete their mission despite the intelligence failure, securing a vital communication relay with minimal casualties. The tension between initiative and adherence to orders represents one of the most challenging aspects of Imperial Guard command. The Departamento Munitorum's tactical doctrines emphasize strict obedience to superior officers, with deviation potentially treated as insubordination or even heresy. Commissars reinforce this approach, executing officers who fail to press attacks or hold positions regardless of changing battlefield conditions. Yet practical combat experience demonstrates that rigid adherence to plans often leads to disaster when those plans encounter the chaotic reality of warfare. Different regiments resolve this tension according to their cultural traditions and combat doctrines. Cadian officers receive explicit training in command intent, understanding the purpose behind orders rather than merely their literal content. This approach allows junior officers to adapt tactics while remaining faithful to strategic objectives, providing flexibility without undermining command authority. By contrast, Death Corps of Krieg commanders emphasize absolute obedience, with officers expected to execute assigned tasks regardless of casualties or changing circumstances. The effectiveness of these different approaches varies depending on battlefield conditions. The Cadian flexible command structure proved advantageous during the fluid, rapidly changing engagements of the 13th Black Crusade, allowing company and platoon commanders to exploit temporary opportunities without waiting for updated orders. The Death Corps' rigid adherence to plans demonstrated its value during the Siege of Vrax, where consistent pressure across all sectors eventually overwhelmed defenders despite heavy initial casualties. For many Guard officers, successful command requires balancing these approaches, maintaining overall adherence to strategic objectives while allowing tactical flexibility within defined parameters. Colonel Commissar Ibrahim Gaunt exemplified this balance during the Sabbat Worlds Crusade, providing his company commanders with clear objectives, while explicitly authorizing them to determine their own approaches based on local conditions. This command philosophy, combined with the specialized infiltration capabilities of his Tanith troops, allowed the regiment to achieve objectives that would have been impossible through rigid application of standard Imperial tactics. The practical implementation of command and control frequently depends on junior officers and non-commissioned officers making critical decisions with limited information. A platoon lieutenant leading troops through urban ruins may have only sporadic Vox contact with company command, forcing them to interpret fragmentary orders and apply them to conditions their superiors cannot directly observe. The quality of officer training becomes particularly evident in these situations, with well-prepared leaders able to extrapolate command intent from incomplete instructions, while poorly trained officers either freeze in indecision or rigidly apply inappropriate tactics. The Guard's approach to battlefield command reflects the broader Imperial philosophy of pragmatic adaptation within ideological constraints. While the ultimate objectives, the destruction of the Emperor's enemies and the preservation of Imperial rule, remain non-negotiable, the specific methods employed to achieve these goals must necessarily vary based on local conditions, available resources, and enemy actions. The most successful Guard commanders internalize this philosophy, maintaining unwavering loyalty to the Imperium while demonstrating tactical flexibility in service to its goals. The name Lord Solar Macharius echoes through the millennia as perhaps the greatest Imperial Guard commander in history, his achievements standing as a testament to what mortal men can accomplish through tactical brilliance and unwavering faith. Born on the hive world of Donia in the Segmentum Solar, Macharius rose through the officer ranks with unprecedented speed, his natural genius for warfare evident from his earliest commands. By the age of 40, he had secured the position of Lord Commander Solar, the highest military rank achievable by a non-Primarch human in Imperial history. The Macharian Crusade began in 392 M41, when Macharius convinced the High Lords of Terra to authorize an unprecedented campaign of expansion into the galactic west, regions unexplored since the dark days of the Horus Heresy. With a vast armada of over 7,000 ships and a force of billions of Imperial Guardsmen drawn from hundreds of regiments, Macharius launched what would become the greatest Imperial expansion since the Emperor himself walked among humanity. The scale of the crusade defied comprehension, over 1,000 worlds brought into compliance in just 7 years. Macharius employed a masterful combination of overwhelming force, diplomatic acumen, and strategic genius that kept his enemies perpetually off balance. Where resistance proved stubborn, he would deploy his elite Macharian invincibles, veterans of dozens of campaigns equipped with the finest weapons and armor the Imperium could provide. Where planetary governors recognized the futility of resistance, he offered generous terms that preserved local authority structures while bringing worlds firmly into the Imperial fold. On Dwynbar, Macharius faced an entrenched Xeno civilization that had repelled 3 previous Imperial expeditions. Rather than engaging in a costly frontal assault, he orchestrated a complex year-long campaign of feints and diversionary attacks that gradually drew enemy forces away from their primary hive clusters. When the Xenos finally committed their reserve forces to counter what appeared to be the Crusade's main thrust, Macharius revealed his true strategy, a massive drop pod assault directly onto the now underdefended ruling council chambers, decapitating the alien leadership in a single stroke. Within days, the remaining resistance collapsed, and a world that had defied Imperial compliance for centuries fell with minimal casualties. The Lord Solar's tactical flexibility proved equally effective against human separatist domains. On Adrantes V, he confronted a coalition of techno-barbarian states armed with recovered Dark Age weaponry. Initial assaults suffered heavy casualties against defenses that included limited void shield technology and graviton weaponry. Adapting quickly, Macharius withdrew his forces and implemented a strategy that exploited the rivalries between the competing states. Through a series of diplomatic overtures, targeted assassinations, and demonstrations of overwhelming firepower against isolated outposts, he systematically dismantled the coalition without fighting a major engagement. When Imperial forces finally advanced on the capital 3 months later, they found the planetary governor waiting to surrender, his former allies having turned against each other. Despite these triumphs, the Macharian crusade ultimately reached its limit at the edge of the Halo stars. There, faced with warp storms of unprecedented magnitude and increasing unrest among his troops, Macharius prepared to press onward. His generals, however, refused to advance further into the unknown, fearing what lay beyond the Emperor's light. In a moment that revealed both his greatness and his humanity, Macharius reportedly wept, declaring, "Even a man who has nothing can still offer his life." He did not punish the generals for their refusal, but instead consolidated the vast territories already conquered. Shortly after this pivotal moment, Macharius died on Damnos III, reportedly from a fever, though persistent rumors suggest assassination by political rivals fearful of his growing power and popularity. The ecclesiarchy rapidly canonized him as a saint, recognizing both his military achievements and his unwavering devotion to the Imperial Creed. His death unleashed the chaos of the Macharian heresy, as his generals carved out personal fiefdoms from the newly conquered territories, requiring decades of bloody conflict to fully reintegrate these regions into the Imperium. The legacy of Macharius extends far beyond the worlds he conquered. His tactical treatises form required study at Schola Progenium facilities throughout the Imperium. Regiments still invoke his name before major engagements, and Macharian Cross medals represent one of the highest honors available to Guard officers. Perhaps most significantly, he stands as proof that even in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, individual humans can achieve greatness that approaches the mythic deeds of the Emperor's Golden Age. While Macharius exemplifies the highest levels of Imperial command, the legend of Colonel Commissar Ibrahim Gaunt illustrates how exceptional leadership at the regimental level can influence the course of entire campaigns. Gaunt's unique dual role, serving as both regimental commander and commissar, originated from his distinctive background and the unusual circumstances of his command. Raised in the Schola Progenium after his father's death fighting the forces of chaos, Gaunt received commissarial training, but found himself thrust into command of the newly founded Tanith first, and only when their original colonel died during the regiment's founding. The Tanith First, colloquially known as Gaunt's Ghosts, earned their nickname through both their homeworld's destruction and their exceptional stealth capabilities. Tanith itself was a heavily forested world whose inhabitants developed remarkable woodcraft skills, including the ability to move through dense vegetation without disturbing a single leaf. These abilities translated surprisingly well to urban and battlefield environments, with Tanith troops demonstrating an almost supernatural talent for infiltration and reconnaissance. The regiment's defining trauma occurred immediately after its founding, when the forces of chaos attacked Tanith during the muster of its first and only Guard regiment. With evacuation ships limited, Gaunt made the agonizing decision to save his troops rather than attempt a futile defense, preserving the regiment but condemning their homeworld to destruction. This decision earned him the resentment of many Tanith soldiers, who initially viewed him as having abandoned their families to death. Overcoming this initial hostility represented one of Gaunt's most significant leadership challenges, accomplished through his willingness to share hardships with his men and his recognition of their unique capabilities. Throughout the Sabbat World's crusade, Gaunt's ghosts specialized in operations that larger, more conventional forces couldn't accomplish. On Fantine, they infiltrated a heavily defended mountain fortress, considered impregnable to frontal assault, eliminating the command staff and sabotaging defensive systems to allow the main Imperial force to advance with minimal casualties. During the Munthax campaign, they navigated arcane warp-influenced forests that had consumed 3 previous reconnaissance units, securing critical intelligence that revealed vulnerabilities in the Chaos defensive network. Perhaps their most remarkable achievement came during the Vervenhive War on Vergast, where the regiment found itself defending a massive hive city against rival forces corrupted by chaos. Despite being woodland specialists fighting in an urban environment, the Tanith's adaptability proved decisive. Gaunt identified critical weaknesses in the enemy's assault pattern and deployed his limited forces with surgical precision, using small teams to eliminate key enemy assets while avoiding direct confrontation with numerically superior forces. When the conflict concluded, the Ghosts incorporated Vergast volunteers into their ranks, beginning a tradition of recruiting from worlds they defended that would maintain the regiment despite the impossibility of receiving reinforcements from their destroyed homeworld. The Jerian mission stands as perhaps the most extraordinary chapter in the regiment's history. A small team, including Gaunt himself, infiltrated this chaos-held world to eliminate a high-value target, only to lose their extraction and remain stranded for over a year behind enemy lines. Operating with minimal equipment and no external support, they established a resistance network that significantly undermined Chaos control of the planet. More remarkably, they accomplished this while exposed to the corrupting influence of Chaos-tainted environment, demonstrating exceptional psychological resilience where many Astartes might have faltered. Their eventual extraction and purification by the Inquisition returned valuable intelligence that would influence Crusade strategy for years afterward. Gaunt's leadership style emphasized initiative and adaptability, with officers encouraged to interpret orders based on ground conditions rather than following rigid protocols. This approach occasionally brought him into conflict with more conventional Imperial commanders, particularly those from aristocratic backgrounds who viewed his commissarial rank as insufficient justification for his independent command. His unusual status as Colonel Commissar generated significant political complications, with various Imperial authorities attempting to separate him from his regiment or subordinate him to more politically connected officers. Despite these challenges, Gaunt's tactical acumen and his regiment's exceptional performance repeatedly proved their value to the broader Sabbat World's crusade. Warmaster Makaroth, recognizing their unique capabilities, frequently assigned them high-risk, high-reward objectives that conventional forces couldn't accomplish. This special status generated resentment from some quarters, but ensured the Ghosts received priority for equipment requisitions and medical support that helped compensate for their limited numbers. While Gaunt and his Ghosts operated primarily at the tactical level, Lord Castellan Krieg demonstrated how a brilliant commander could influence conflicts of planetary or even sector-wide scale. Born on Cadia, Krieg experienced the harsh military traditions of his homeworld from his earliest years, with weapons training beginning before his 5th birthday, and live fire exercises against captured cultists by age 10. His exceptional tactical aptitude saw him advance rapidly through the ranks of the Cadian shock troops, eventually reaching the position of Lord Castellan, supreme military commander of Cadia itself. Krieg's genius lay in his mastery of combined arms warfare and his ability to identify and exploit momentary weaknesses in enemy dispositions. During the 13th Black Crusade, when Abaddon the Despoiler launched his massive assault on Cadia and surrounding systems, Krieg orchestrated defensive operations against forces that outnumbered his own by orders of magnitude. His signature tactic involved presenting apparent vulnerabilities that would tempt enemy commanders into committing reserves, then revealing previously concealed heavy weapons or armored formations at the precise moment when the enemy had overextended. At the Battle of Tyrok Fields, Krieg faced a massive chaos formation spearheaded by traitor Astartes and supported by traitor Titan legions. Imperial forces appeared to be deployed in a conventional defensive line with predictable concentrations of heavy weapons covering likely approach vectors. When the Chaos forces committed to a main thrust against what their reconnaissance identified as a weak point in the Imperial lines, they discovered too late that Krieg had concealed an entire Baneblade company in hollowed-out hab blocks overlooking the battlefield. The super heavy tanks emerged simultaneously from multiple concealed positions, catching the Chaos advance in devastating crossfire, while previously hidden artillery batteries prevented effective retreat. What had appeared to be an imminent Imperial defeat transformed into a significant victory, with 3 traitor Titans destroyed and a Lord of Chaos captured. Krieg's defensive genius extended beyond conventional military assets to incorporate civilian infrastructure and geographical features into his planning. He systematically mapped Cadia's major cities to identify buildings that could be rapidly converted to defensive strong points, pre-positioning supplies and ammunition in concealed caches throughout urban areas. When Chaos forces breached outer defenses and penetrated into Kasser Gallon, they found themselves fighting through streets where every 10th building had been subtly reinforced and equipped with hidden heavy weapon emplacements that activated as they passed. Perhaps most remarkably, Krieg maintained effective command and control despite the chaos of planetary invasion and the electromagnetic interference generated by both Imperial and Chaos weaponry. He established redundant communication networks using everything from hardwired Vox systems to runner corps composed of juveniles too young for formal military service. When primary command centers came under attack, he seamlessly transferred authority to secondary and tertiary facilities without interrupting the coordination of defensive operations. Despite Krieg's tactical brilliance, the sheer scale of Abaddon's assault ultimately proved overwhelming. The destruction of the Blackstone Fortress and its impact on Cadia's surface created tectonic instabilities that tore the planet apart. Even in this final defeat, Krieg's leadership enabled the evacuation of millions of Cadian troops and civilians who would otherwise have perished, preserving the fighting traditions of Cadia despite the loss of the world itself. Krieg himself disappeared during the final evacuation, with conflicting reports suggesting either heroic last-stand defense of a critical spaceport or capture by Chaos forces. While the fate of Krieg remains uncertain, the legend of Commissar Sebastian Yarrick continues to inspire Imperial forces across the galaxy. Unlike many famous Guard heroes who rose from privileged backgrounds or demonstrated exceptional abilities from youth, Yarrick began his career as a relatively ordinary commissar assigned to Hive Hellsreach on Armageddon. His transformation into living legend began during the Second War for Armageddon, when Orc warlord Gozkul Thraka led a massive war against this vital industrial world. As Orc forces overwhelmed outlying defenses and approached Hive Hellsreach, planetary leadership appeared paralyzed by indecision. Yarrick took effective control of the Hive's defense, executing the planetary governor for attempting to negotiate surrender and implementing draconian measures to mobilize the civilian population for defense. His uncompromising leadership stabilized the initially chaotic response with his famous declaration, "They will break upon this fortress like water on rock," becoming a rallying cry for defenders. Yarrick's defensive strategy demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Orc psychology. Rather than attempting to hold the entire perimeter against numerically superior forces, he deliberately left weak points that channeled Orc advances into prepared killing zones, where pre-registered artillery and interlocking fields of fire could inflict maximum casualties. By allowing the Orcs limited advances that appeared to indicate success, he exploited their tendency to commit more forces to perceived breakthroughs, creating opportunities to eliminate larger concentrations with minimal risk to his own troops. The Commissar's legend grew substantially after personal combat with Orc warlord Uglehard, who severed Yarrick's arm during the battle for Hive Hellsreach's primary generatorium. Despite this grievous injury, Yarrick killed the warlord and continued directing defensive operations while Medikey attached a tourniquet. When later offered bionic replacement, he famously requested a power claw salvaged from an orc knob, incorporating his enemy's technology into his own body as a psychological weapon. This distinctive augmetic, combined with his subsequent addition of a bionic eye with integrated laser weapon, transformed Yarrick into a figure who inspired superstitious fear among the normally fearless orcs. By the Third War for Armageddon, Yarrick had achieved almost mythic status among both Imperial forces and the orcs themselves. Ghazghkull's return with an even larger wasp specifically targeted Yarrick's areas of responsibility, with the orc warlord apparently considering the elderly commissar his worthy nemesis. Despite his advanced age, Yarrick once again took to the field, his presence providing significant morale benefits to Imperial defenders while visibly unsettling orc forces who had grown to believe he could not be killed. During the battle for Firebase Hades, Yarrick demonstrated that his tactical acumen remained undiminished by age. When orc forces breached the perimeter using tunneling machines that bypassed defensive lines, the commissar rapidly reorganized available forces into concentric defensive positions centered around the Firebase's ammunition stores. Rather than attempting to repel the orcs completely, an impossibility given available forces, he implemented a fighting withdrawal that drew the greenskins deeper into the complex. Once a critical mass of orcs had committed to the advance, Yarrick ordered the detonation of perplaced charges that collapsed tunnels behind the orc force, trapping them in compartmentalized sections where they could be eliminated systematically without threatening the broader Imperial position. The personal rivalry between Yarrick and Ghazghkull reached its apparent conclusion during the final phase of the Third War, when Imperial forces finally drove the orcs from Armageddon's surface. Ghazghkull escaped the planet aboard his space hulk, with Yarrick reportedly requesting command of an Imperial Navy vessel to pursue his nemesis into the void. This pursuit has taken him far from Armageddon, with occasional reports placing him on distant worlds where Ghazghkull's forces have appeared, the elderly commissar seemingly sustained by sheer determination and his absolute refusal to allow his arch-enemy to escape justice. Yarrick's legacy extends far beyond his personal achievements. His defensive doctrines have been incorporated into Schola Progenium tactical curricula, particularly his approaches to urban warfare and counter-orc operations. The Yarrick Protocols provide standardized responses to orc invasion patterns, emphasizing the importance of eliminating warbosses and knobs to disrupt the Greenskins' hierarchical command structure. Perhaps most significantly, his example has inspired generations of commissars to view themselves not merely as disciplinarians, but as potential combat leaders whose personal courage can transform the outcome of seemingly hopeless situations. The emergence of the Great Rift, that galaxy-spanning tear in reality that bisected the Imperium following the fall of Cadia, fundamentally transformed the strategic landscape for the Astra Militarum. Countless Guard regiments found themselves cut off from command authority, supply lines severed and reinforcements impossible as the astronomical phenomenon known as the Noctis Aeterna plunged systems into darkness. On thousands of worlds, isolated Guard formations faced impossible odds against enemies emboldened by the Imperium's apparent fragmentation. The Terran system itself came under direct assault as never before. The Blood Angels and their successor chapters made a desperate last stand against demonic legions on the doorstep of the Imperial Palace. While Space Marines fought in orbit and the palace approaches, it was the Astra Militarum who held the sprawling hive cities and industrial zones of Terra against cultist uprisings and demonic manifestations. The Lucifer Blacks, Terra's elite Guard regiment, coordinated with the Adeptus Arbites to contain dozens of simultaneous insurgencies across multiple hive sectors, demonstrating the Guard's critical importance even at the heart of Imperial power. As the initial crisis of the Noctis Aeterna passed, the resurrection of Guilliman as Lord Commander of the Imperium heralded significant changes for the Astra Militarum. The Primarch's strategic genius immediately recognized the Guard's irreplaceable role in holding the fragmented Imperium together. While his Indomitus crusade relied heavily on the newly created Primaris Space Marines as its spearhead, Guilliman understood that only the Guard possessed the numerical strength to secure and hold liberated territories. Guilliman's military reforms addressed long-standing inefficiencies in the Departamento Munitorum that had calcified over millennia. He established the Logos Historica Veritatis to cut through layers of administrative corruption and identify which threatened worlds most urgently required Guard reinforcement. This data-driven approach allowed for more efficient allocation of limited military resources, prioritizing strategically valuable planets rather than responding to political influence or outdated threat assessments. The Primarch's reorganization extended to the Guard's command structure itself. He removed several Lord Generals whose appointments had been based on political connections rather than military competence, replacing them with proven battlefield commanders regardless of their social origins. This meritocratic approach generated resistance from entrenched aristocratic interests, but dramatically improved operational effectiveness in critical war zones. When Lord General Vervin of the Ulador sector protested his replacement by the common-born Colonel Macrek, Guilliman personally reviewed both officers' combat records before the assembled High Lords, methodically demonstrating Macrek's superior tactical acumen through detailed analysis of their respective campaigns. Perhaps most significantly, Guilliman modified the traditional tithe system to create more specialized Guard regiments tailored to specific tactical needs. Rather than raising generic infantry formations from all worlds, the revised system assessed planetary environments and cultural traditions to determine what specialized forces each world could best provide. Jungle worlds would primarily contribute light infantry suited for dense terrain operations, while industrial hive worlds would focus on mechanized formations that leveraged their manufacturing capabilities and urban combat experience. The deployment patterns of Guard forces changed dramatically in response to the strategic realities of the divided Imperium. With approximately half of all Imperial worlds located in the Imperium Nihilus, the portion of the galaxy cut off from Terra by the Great Rift, many Guard regiments found themselves operating with minimal oversight or support from central command. This necessitated greater autonomy for field officers and increased reliance on local recruitment to replace battle losses. The Mordian 84th Infantry Regiment exemplified this adaptation after becoming stranded in the Imperium Nihilus during transit to their intended deployment zone. Finding themselves in the Sanguis system as it came under attack by a Death Guard warband, the regiment's commander, Colonel Harkness, established defensive positions around the system's primary, Hive City, and organized local PDF forces into auxiliary formations that adopted Mordian drilling techniques and discipline. Over 3 years of constant warfare, these locally raised troops gradually integrated into the regiment's structure, replacing fallen Mordians while maintaining the unit's distinctive tactical doctrine and martial traditions. This pattern repeated across the Imperium Nihilus, with stranded Guard regiments becoming the nuclei around which local resistance formed. On worlds where Imperial authority had completely collapsed, these regiments often became the only remaining representation of the Emperor's rule, their officers assuming administrative as well as military authority. The Cadian 122nd found themselves in this position on Carrick Prime after warp storms isolated the agricultural world. Lieutenant Colonel Thade, the highest-ranking surviving officer, implemented martial law and organized the planet's food production to support both his troops and the civilian population, while establishing a training program that eventually produced 3 new regiments raised in the Cadian tradition. In the Imperium Sanctus, the half of the galaxy that maintained contact with Terra Guard deployments focused on reinforcing the borders of the Great Rift and containing the numerous incursions that spilled from this warp tier. The Astra Militarum found itself stretched thinner than at any point since the Horus Heresy, with countless worlds calling for military assistance against new or intensified threats. This necessitated difficult strategic choices, with some planets effectively abandoned to their fate, while Guard forces concentrated on defending systems of greater strategic value. The threat posed by the Death Guard reached unprecedented levels during this period. Mortarian's forces exploited the galactic upheaval to launch coordinated attacks across multiple sectors, often targeting agricultural worlds crucial to Imperial supply chains. The biological weapons deployed by these Chaos Space Marines created unique challenges for Guard commanders, who needed to maintain quarantine protocols while conducting military operations. During the Plague Wars in the Ultramar system, Guard regiments found themselves fighting alongside Guilliman's Primaris Marines against Death Guard and their demonic allies. The Cadian 39th Mechanized Infantry developed specialized tactics for this theater, with troops wearing sealed environment suits and employing flamers as their primary weapons to purge infected areas. Decontamination protocols became as important as ammunition resupply, with dedicated Medikey units attached to each company to monitor for signs of Nurgle's corruption among the troops. The 122nd Valhallan Ice Warriors demonstrated similar adaptation when defending the pharmaceutical manufacturing world of Sanitarium Prime. When conventional tactics proved ineffective against the Death Guard's inexorable advance, Colonel Raykov analyzed plague zombie movement patterns and identified that the infected avoided areas treated with specific chemical compounds produced in the planet's Medikey facilities. His forces established defensive perimeters treated with these compounds, creating safe zones where troops could operate without environmental seals and effectively channeling enemy advances into predetermined killing zones covered by heavy weapons emplacements. Genestealer cults emerged as another significant threat in the era Indomitus, with the psychic disruption caused by the Great Rift accelerating the spread of these insidious Xenos infections. Guard forces found themselves fighting enemies who had infiltrated civilian populations, sometimes including other Imperial organizations. This required fundamental changes to counterinsurgency tactics, with greater emphasis on intelligence gathering and surgical strikes rather than the Guard's traditional approach of overwhelming firepower. The Catachan 18th faced this challenge on Vigilius Prime, where a Genestealer cult had infiltrated the upper echelons of the planetary government. Rather than employing their usual jungle warfare tactics, the regiment adapted to urban operations, establishing small kill teams that operated independently to track and eliminate cult leaders. These teams incorporated Adeptus Ministorum priests who could perform psychic screening of suspected collaborators, allowing precise identification of infected individuals before they could warn others. This methodical approach gradually dismantled the cult's command structure without alerting the Patriarch to the operation's full scope. The awakening of dormant Necron dynasties presented perhaps the most technologically challenging threat for Guard formations. The Necrons' phase technology, reanimation protocols, and advanced energy weapons rendered many traditional Guard tactics ineffective. Vehicles proved particularly vulnerable to Gauss weapons, forcing greater reliance on infantry operations supported by artillery deployed beyond the Necrons' immediate detection range. The Armageddon Steel Legion developed effective counter-Necron tactics during the defense of Forge World Metallica. After initial armored assaults suffered catastrophic losses to Necron anti-vehicle weaponry, Colonel Jerton shifted to mechanized infantry operations, using chimeras as mobile firebase platforms rather than assault vehicles. Troops would deploy at maximum effective lasgun range, establish overlapping fields of fire, then withdraw before Necron forces could close to optimal engagement distance. This mobile defense gradually wore down Necron numbers while preserving Guard strength, eventually allowing the identification and targeting of command units, whose destruction temporarily disrupted the Xenos' coordination. Guilliman's military reforms extended beyond tactical adaptations to address fundamental issues in Guard organization and equipment. Recognizing that the Departamento Munitorum's bureaucracy had grown so labyrinthine that essential supplies often failed to reach frontline units, he implemented a streamlined requisition system that reduced administrative layers between combat formations and supply depots. While this reform faced resistance from entrenched administratum interests, its effectiveness became immediately apparent as equipment delivery times decreased by an average of 43% across major war zones. The Primarch also ordered comprehensive review of standard Guard equipment patterns, identifying designs that had remained unchanged for millennia despite clear deficiencies. The Godwin pattern lasgun received its first major modification in over 3,000 years, with improved focusing crystals that increased energy efficiency by 12% while reducing overheating issues during sustained fire. The Aquila Mark VII flak armor incorporated new impact-absorbing materials developed by the Adeptus Mechanicus, providing improved protection against shrapnel and low-velocity projectiles without increasing weight or reducing mobility. These equipment improvements, while seemingly modest, significantly enhanced Guard combat effectiveness when multiplied across billions of troops. The reduced power consumption of modified lasguns meant each soldier could remain in combat longer without resupply, while the improved armor reduced casualties from artillery bombardment and fragmentation weapons, threats that historically accounted for over 60% of Guard combat deaths. Perhaps the most significant organizational change implemented by Guilliman was the creation of rapid response battle groups specifically designed to exploit temporary gaps in the Great Rift. These formations combined elements from multiple Guard regiments with naval assets and occasionally Primaris Space Marine support, creating balanced forces capable of responding to emergencies with minimal preparation time. When stable warp routes briefly appeared, these battle groups would deploy immediately to reinforce threatened worlds in the Imperium Nihilus, sometimes arriving just hours before the warp corridor collapsed again. The 108th Cadian Shock Troops formed the core of one such rapid response force, Battle Group Excalibur. Operating from the fortress world of Chorazin at the edge of the Great Rift, this formation conducted 17 major relief operations in the first 5 years after its creation, preventing the loss of multiple strategic worlds to Chaos forces. Their most notable action came during the defense of Forge World Styges IX, where they deployed within 30 minutes of receiving the distress call and established defensive positions around critical manufacturing centers hours before a word-bearer's assault force made planetfall. As the initial crisis of the Great Rift stabilized and the Indomitus Crusade concluded its first phase, the Astra Militarum began the monumental task of rebuilding its strength and adapting to the new strategic reality. The loss of Cadia, for millennia the benchmark for Guard training and doctrine, necessitated the establishment of new exemplar formations and training worlds. Guilliman designated several planets as replacement training centers, including Elysia, Pretoria, and Vestroia, each tasked with developing specialized tactical doctrines suited to the unique threats of the era Indomitus. The future of the Astra Militarum in the 42nd millennium remains uncertain as the Imperium faces unprecedented challenges on multiple fronts. Yet the fundamental truth that has sustained the Guard through 10,000 years of continuous warfare remains unchanged. While Space Marines, Custodians, and other elite forces may represent the Emperor's wrath, only the ordinary men and women of the Imperial Guard possess the numbers and determination to hold the line against the encroaching darkness. In a galaxy where humanity faces extinction from countless threats, the Guardsman's lasgun, faith, and courage remain the Imperium's most numerous and essential weapons. As Lord Commander Guilliman himself noted when addressing the High Lords of Terra, the Adeptus Astartes may be the Emperor's sword, but the Astra Militarum is his shield, without which the Imperium cannot stand. In the darkness of the era Indomitus, as humanity faces threats more numerous and dire than at any point since the Horus Heresy, the Imperial Guard continues to demonstrate the truth of their ancient motto: only in death does duty end.